Chapter 921, Supreme Emotion Forsaking Technique. Emotion Severing Sect. A blue-clad young man was sitting in a secluded courtyard. Waves of turquoise ripples were swirling around his body. It was the water concept. In the sky, 200 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons descended as they whirled. They quietly waited and was poised to attack at any time. The green-clad young man sitting there did not use the slightest amount of his origin energy at all. In other words, his water concept alone managed to urge the heaven and earth energy to gather 200 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons. It was obvious that he had comprehended the first-level advanced water concept. Time passed by quietly. After God knows how long, the wave of turquoise ripples around the green-clad young man suddenly churned and emitted waves of water mist. It spread out like a gentle breeze caressing the rain. Water droplets scattered from the mist and sprinkled the plants planted in the garden, giving them a strong breath of life. All of a sudden, the blue-clad young man who was engulfed in the turquoise ripples opened his eyes. A bright gleam flashed across his eyes as he muttered under his breath, "Supreme Emotion Forsaking Technique." As water reaches its acme, it condenses into ice. Almost immediately after his words left his mouth, the turquoise ripples by his body emitted a bone-chilling icy aura until there was no mist left. Not long after, the waves of turquoise ripples condensed and formed a layer of thick ice. The thick ice enveloped the blue-clad young man's entire body. However, he did not seem to have noticed anything. His face still remained aloof as he continued to mumble the incantations without pause. Whoosh! Suddenly, a tall figure appeared in the sky out of thin air. It was an expressionless middle-aged man. "I can't believe he has mastered the supreme emotion-forsaking technique. It's the ultimate cultivation method that has been passed down for several thousands of years in the emotion-severing sect, and nobody had been able to master it. When water reaches its acme, it'll condense into ice. When ice reaches its acme, it'll breed fire, and when fire reaches its acme, it'll converge and become thunder," the middle-aged man murmured to himself. "With his current progress, I'm sure he'll be able to successfully breed the fire concept with the ice concept in no time. At that time, he'll be able to simultaneously cast the ice and fire concepts. When ice and fire unify, its power will multiply as well." As if he was hit by some sort of realization, there was a slight change in the middle-aged man's expression. Whoosh! When he lowered his head, he saw intense flames had erupted out of the thick layer of solid ice that was enveloping the young man and rose up to the sky. Despite the hot air that the blazing flame emitted, it did not melt the extremely cold ice. Similarly, the extremely cold ice did not extinguish the flame either. It looked extremely strange to the eyes. The harmonious existence between the two elements seemed to be completely contrary to the principle of water extinguishing fire. Whoosh! At this moment, 200 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons above the young man's head suddenly shifted to the side, and another 200 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons immediately appeared. Suddenly, boom! The young man's legs slammed on the ground. The thick bricks on the ground cracked and fissures began to spread out in all directions. It looked like a huge spider web. There was a sudden burst of coldness that emitted a hot wave in this huge spider web. This contradictory combination caused the plants in the small courtyard to immediately lose their vitality. Swish! The moment the young man leapt on the ground, he used his force and soared up into the sky. He rushed into the air like a flash of lightning. Supreme emotion-forsaking technique, the union of ice and flame. The young man hovered in the air and muttered under his breath. The moment he reached the end of his muttering, he shouted without warning. The moment he shouted, the ice and flame on his body strangely merged into one and formed a new bluish flame that was crystal clear and beautiful. It was like an icy flame that was burning intensely. Waves of extreme coldness and heat radiated from the icy flame. The contradictory combination caused the heaven and earth energy in the sky to whirl once again. Wham! Without any warning, the young man took a stride forward, and his fist punched out to the sky like a cannonball that was swiftly shot out. Blue flames rushed out from his fist as it formed a shock wave that swept and tore through the sky. It set off a series of deafening explosions. Waves and waves of air that was a mixture of coldness and heat spread all over the place. Next to the 400 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons on top of his head, another 200 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons appeared without any prior warning. From the beginning until the end, he did not use his origin energy at all. In other words, this strength of 200 ancient horned dragons did not come from his origin energy at all. Not bad. Although your union of ice and flame is still at the rudiment stage, it's enough to multiply your strength by half. When you manage to reach a higher stage and cultivate it to the mastery stage, it'll be able to multiply your strength by 2 times. The cold-looking middle-aged man suddenly appeared before the young man. A smile that rarely appeared on his face was playing at the corner of his mouth. If Duan Lingtian was here at this moment, he would be able to identify the middle-aged man as Peian, the sect master of the emotion-severing sect, with just a glance. As for the young man, he was Zhang Yang, the flame young master. The supreme emotion-forsaking technique was the cultivation method inherited from the emotion-severing sect since the ancient time. It was said that it was regarded as a first-rate cultivation method in the entire Cloud continent. However, no one in the emotion-severing sect had successfully cultivated it all this time. Other than having to sever one's emotional ties completely, cultivating the supreme emotion-forsaking technique would require the person to comprehend the water concept to a certain level as well. When water reaches its acme, it would condense into ice. When ice reaches its acme, it would breed fire. When fire reaches its acme, it would converge and become thunder. These short 30 words were exactly the outline of the supreme emotion-forsaking technique. For those who cultivated the supreme emotion-forsaking technique, once they managed to successfully condense ice from water and comprehend the ice concept, they would be able to rely on the ice concept to breed the fire concept that emerged the moment the ice concept reached its acme. Moreover, they would not have to cultivate the fire concept. When the ice concept made progress, the fire concept would simultaneously progress as well. This was because it originated from the ice concept. The same theory applied to the thunder concept that would come later as well. The fact that it was considered as a first-rate cultivation method in the entire Cloud continent naturally meant that the supreme emotion-forsaking technique's powerful nature was not only limited to this. Anyone who had successfully cultivated the supreme emotion-forsaking technique would also be able to master another peculiar technique. It was called the union of ice and fire. The union of ice and fire was separated into 2 stages, the rudiment and the mastery stages. Compared to the other cumbersome martial skills, it was definitely much simpler. The rudiment stage allowed one's ice and fire concept to merge. Not only could it combine the power of the 2, it could also multiply the power by half. Similar to Zhang Yan earlier. Through the supreme emotion-forsaking technique, his first-level advanced water concept was transformed into the first-level advanced ice concept. It was equivalent to the strength of 200 ancient horned dragons. The fire concept that was bred out of this was at the same level as well, the first-level advanced fire concept, with a strength that was also equivalent to 200 ancient horned dragons. The 2 of them added up together was equal to the strength of 400 ancient horned dragons. With the help from the union of ice and fire, the strength would multiply by half-fold, which was equivalent to 200 ancient horned dragons. When he managed to cultivate his union of ice and fire to the mastery level, his base strength would multiply by 2-fold and would have the strength of 400 ancient horned dragons. The stronger the ice concept was, the stronger the fire concept would be. The strength of the union of ice and fire would be more powerful too. Other than that, the union of ice and fire could only be regarded as a combination of the ice and fire concepts that could be executed together. It had no conflicts at all with one's martial skills. For this reason, it was possible to cast some martial skills on top of the union of ice and fire. As a result, the strength would increase too. Master. The moment Zhang Yan saw him, he hastily bowed as a salutation and dared not slack at all. Get ready, we'll depart tomorrow for the martial emperor's secret treasure. Peian nodded his head. The instant he finished his words, he vanished without a trace again before Zhang Yan's eyes. After Peian had left, a brilliant gleam flashed across Zhang Yan's eyes as he murmured to himself, with my cultivation base at the 7th level void interpretation, plus the union of ice and fire that was created out of the fusion of ice and fire concepts, I possess the strength of 700 ancient horned dragons without a spirit weapon. If everything goes smoothly, the other young powerhouses from the other sects will not be a match for me. His eyes shone with confidence when he finished his sentence. Since he joined the emotion-severing sect and demonstrated his innate skill and comprehension, his consumption of spirit fruits did not cease at all. For this reason, there was no more spirit fruit that was suitable for him to consume after he made a breakthrough to the 6th level void interpretation. Due to the abundance of spirit fruits in the emotion-severing sect, he had consumed all of them previously, so he was already completely immune to the medicinal efficacy of the fruits. For this reason, since the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, he only managed to make a breakthrough to the 7th level void interpretation due to lack of suitable spirit fruits that he could consume. Duan Lingtian just left the Darken dynasty. Before this, he did not consume any spirit fruit that was exclusively for a void interpretation martial artist. However, since he went to Blade Sect, he would have no shortage of spirit fruits at all. I'm sure his current cultivation base must be higher than mine. As a familiar purple figure emerged in his mind, a rare and faint smile crept up to the corner of his mouth. However, even if his cultivation base is higher than mine, and his concept is raised with the help of the profound assimilation formation, his strength will not be as good as mine since I cultivated the supreme emotion forsaking technique successfully. Only Zishang might pose a threat to me. The moment he recalled Zishang, a hint of dread could be seen in between his brows. He still could not help but shudder when he thought about the secret technique that Zishang demonstrated previously. Second level void interpretation. After he had cast his secret technique, his cultivation base immediately soared up to the 6th level void interpretation. It was fortunate that Zishang's concepts did not rise together as well. Otherwise, most of the young powerhouses from the other sects that would enter the Martial Emperor's secret treasure this time, including himself, would most likely not be a match for Zishang. 921 Chapter 922, For the Sake of Profundity Fragment. Northern Desert, the Southwest region. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Figures flew from the northeast with an extremely fast speed. They passed through the clouds in the sky and left a visible, sky road. A group of people was led by 3 middle-aged men, an old man, and a middle-aged woman with 20 people following closely behind. All 20 of them were young men and women. None of them was over 40 years old. We're arriving soon. The middle-aged man who was leading the group was none other than Guo Chong, the sect leader of Five Element sect. When he withdrew his gaze from afar, he also began to slow down his speed. The rest of the people immediately slowed down as well. We've arrived. The 20 young people behind him were stunned. It has already been more than a month since the day of our departure. We'll be arriving at our destination soon. Guo Chong's voice was transmitted to all of their ears. We're really arriving soon. Duan Lingtian was following behind as he slowed down his speed as well. The instant he heard Guo Chong's words, his eyes lit up. Huang Daniu looked at Duan Lingtian as he spoke to Duan Lingtian through voice transmission. Duan Lingtian, we'll arrive at the Martial Emperor's secret treasure soon. At that time, you and I will join forces and there's no need for us to worry about not being able to get the treasures that were left behind by the Martial Emperor. Duan Lingtian was rendered speechless by Huang Daniu's brazenness. Do I really need to join forces with the others? Even if I really want to join forces with the others, I'll never choose this guy. Nangong Chen from Gold Peak is more suitable. Okay. Nangong Chen's current cultivation base must have already broken through to the 9th level void interpretation. Similar to his first level advanced earth concept, his strength was extremely strong as well. Duan Lingtian was the only person he was second to among the younger generation in the Five Element sect. Duan Lingtian had no doubts that Nangong Chen could make a breakthrough to the 9th level void interpretation. After all, the 2 spirit fruits that he had consumed previously were issued by the Five Element sect in a unified manner. Wood Peak received 4 while Gold Peak received 3. Out of the 3 that Gold Peak received, at least 2 must have been given to Nangong Chen. Throughout this journey, I'm sure all of you must have been curious about the destination. I'm going to tell you about it now. Guo Chong's voice continued to resonate. The group of Five Element sect's disciples, eyes lit up immediately, apart from Duan Lingtian and Huang Daniu. Even Nangong Chen was not an exception. The moment Duan Lingtian heard this, he lifted his brows at once. He knew that Guo Chong was going to tell them about the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. The place that we're heading to this time is the secret treasure that the Martial Emperor left behind. Guo Chong's words entered their ears clearly. Other than the 4 peak masters, Duan Lingtian and Huang Daniu who looked very calm, the rest of the Five Element sect's disciples were stunned for a moment before chaos broke out among them. Secret treasure that was left behind by a Martial Emperor. My goodness, I wonder how many treasures are contained in the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. It must have all sorts of things like the 9th level concept fragments, grade 1 spirit weapon, or grade 1 medicinal pill, right? I knew it. I knew it certainly won't be for some trivial matter that the sect leader and the 4 peak masters personally took us out this time. It's just that it did not cross my mind that the sect leader and the 4 peak masters would bring us to the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. The group of young Five Element sect's disciples discussed animatedly. Their faces were filled with excitement. Even the Nangong twins were not an exception. Nangong Yi looked eager, and his eyes were shining brilliantly. Nangong Chen, on the other hand, still had a cold and aloof look on his face, but his eyes that were gleaming brightly undoubtedly betrayed his mood at the moment. According to the news that I received, the Martial Emperor's secret treasure was left behind when he was close to his death. All of his inheritance is inside, and they're waiting for the right person from the future to take them. When Guo Chang was announcing this, his tone became slightly higher than usual. How could the inheritance that was left behind by a martial emperor be something ordinary? Even he who held the sect master position in the five-element sect could not contain his excitement. Inheritance. The moment Duan Lingtian heard this, his heart gave a sudden jolt. Although he already knew beforehand that they were going to the martial emperor's secret treasure, he thought that it was merely some games that were created by a martial emperor when he was feeling bored. However, it looked like this was not the case at all. Without a doubt, it did not matter if it was a game or inheritance that was left behind by a martial emperor. They would both contain some items that people would fight to the death over. However, it was obvious the latter would contain a much valuable treasure. This was because the latter might contain the wealth that had been accumulated by the martial emperor during his entire life. It was enough to make any force, or anyone, in the Cloud Continent to turn green over it. I'm really getting more and more excited about it. Duan Lingtian's eyes shone brightly as he muttered to himself. At the same time, after they heard Guo Chang's words, the group of young five-element sect's disciples' breath began to quicken. The inheritance from a martial emperor. What did that mean? The inheritance that was left behind by a martial emperor is all of the wealth accumulated by him during his life. Whoever obtains it would definitely soar up to the sky. I can't wait to go now. However, since it's the inheritance left by a martial emperor, why did the five peak masters bring us along with them? Wouldn't it be better if they bring the sect elders with them to take the treasures? Could it be that there's some reason behind it? The group of five-element sect disciples buried their heads together in a heated discussion. Eventually, one by one they slowly looked towards Guo Chang, the sect leader of the five-element sect, and the other four peak masters with a questioning look on their faces. This time, the martial emperor's secret treasure that we're headed to is filled with all sorts of tests that were left behind by the martial emperor. We'll have to enter the secret treasure ourselves to search for them if we want to get the treasures that were left behind. Naturally, Guo Chang heard the discussions of the five-element sect's disciples. Slowly, he continued to explain, "We brought all of you here because the gate of that place is covered with an inscription formation. That inscription formation only allows those who are below 40 to enter the place. If we force our way in, the martial emperor's secret treasure will collapse immediately. Now, do you understand the reason why I brought all of you here?" Guo Chang's words entered the ears of the five-element sect's disciples. Other than Duan Lingtian and Huang Daniu who were already prepared, the other 18 people could not help but be taken aback. However, they grasped the situation completely after listening to Guo Chang's explanation. It was not because the sect leader and the four peak masters refused to bring the sect elders with them. It was because none of the sect senior officials, including themselves, were able to enter the martial emperor's secret treasure. Only young people below the age of 40 like them could enter the martial emperor's secret treasure. Furthermore, the five-element sect is not the only one who knows about the martial emperor's secret treasure. As far as I know, the four major forces in the southern district of the northern desert also know about the existence of the martial emperor's secret treasure. When the martial emperor's secret treasure opens its gate, they'll definitely bring the best young disciples they have as well. When Guo Chang announced this, his face turned glum immediately. In other words, apart from the 20 of you who'll enter the martial emperor's secret treasure, the best young disciples from the four major forces in the southern district of the northern desert will enter with all of you as well. As for what's going to happen inside, I'm sure you can guess it already. For this reason, all of you must be mentally prepared for it, Guo Chang finished in one breath. What? The four major forces of the northern desert also know about the existence of the martial emperor's secret treasure. Oh, Lord, if the young disciples of the four major forces enter with us, we might not be able to hold on to the treasure even if we manage to find it. The four major forces are in no way inferior to our five-element sect. It seems like going into the martial emperor's secret treasure is going to be a perilous journey. Other than Duan Lingtian and Huang Daniu who were already well prepared, the group of five-element sect's disciples was astonished. Judging from their words, it was clear that some of them were filled with dread. Naturally, there were also some whose eyes shone brilliantly like Nangong Chen and Nangong Yi. The moment they heard that other young powerhouses from other forces would be entering the Martial Emperor's secret treasure too, a strong battle intention began to radiate from their bodies unconsciously. Apart from the twins, Hu Fei, Tan Huang, and Tian Zhen's eyes were all filled with anticipation as well. Naturally, the sect won't force you if you don't want to go in. However, before you make any decision, I still want to talk to all of you on behalf of the sect. When he reached this point, Guo Chang paused for a while before continuing. Among all of the things hidden inside the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, the sect's only interested in the profundity fragments. As for the remaining things like 9th level concept fragments or grade 1 spirit weapon, well, finders keepers. The sects will not seize it from you by force. The profundity fragment. The moment the words left Guo Chang's mouth, other than Duan Lingtian, the other 19 5-element sect's disciples, including Huang Daniu, narrowed their eyes immediately. Naturally, they all knew fairly well what the profundity fragment meant. If the 5-element sect could get their hands on the profundity fragment, even only one piece was enough to give birth to a Martial Emperor. And, right now, the Martial Emperor's secret treasure that they were about to enter actually contained the profundity fragment. All of them came around after giving it some thoughts. After all, that was a place that contained the inheritance of a Martial Emperor during the course of his entire life. There must be no shortage of profundity fragments in the wealth accumulated during his entire lifetime. Whoever obtains the profundity fragment will become a great benefactor of our sect. In the future, the sect will fulfill and never refuse the request of the disciple who turns in the profundity fragment as long as it's within the sect's ability. Guo Chang said with a solemn look as he reached the end of the sentence. However, if you don't turn in the profundity fragments and we find it after we perform a search on you, you won't get the benefits anymore. Guo Chang's tone became harsher than before as he said, whichever 5-element sect's disciple who comes out of the Martial Emperor's secret treasure will have to hand in their spatial ring and let us have a thorough search. Once we've confirmed that you don't have the profundity fragment on you, we'll return the spatial ring to you. As for the other treasures, the sect will not lay a finger on it at all. Don't even think about hiding the spatial ring from us. You should know that Peak Master Tiangu is an inscription master, and when he expands his spiritual energy, he'll be able to find out where you hide it even if you swallow the ring into your stomach. 922 Chapter 923, Arousing the Enthusiasm. Guo Chang's words completely discouraged some of the 5-element sect's disciples from trying to hide the profundity fragment after they found it. If their spatial ring would be searched as well, it would definitely be impossible to hide the profundity fragment. Search the spatial ring. Upon hearing Guo Chang's words, Duan Lingtian frowned a little. Unlike the other 5-element sect's disciples, he had already possessed 3 profundity fragments even before he entered the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. They were obtained from the Sword Monarch's treasure before this. He could still accept it if the profundity fragments that he found in the Martial Emperor's secret treasure were taken away. However, if the 3 profundity fragments that he originally possessed got taken away, who should he lodge a complaint to? Sect leader, Duan Lingtian looked at Guo Chang and spoke up immediately. Yes. Guo Chang stared at Duan Lingtian with a puzzled look. The stern look on his face had vanished without a trace. Instead, it was replaced with a smile as he asked, anything? In his opinion, among all of the young 5-element sect's disciples who would be entering the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, the person who possessed the greatest strength was none other than Duan Lingtian. He had pinned most of his hopes on Duan Lingtian this time. For this reason, he did not put on the air of a sect leader in front of Duan Lingtian. What if we manage to get 2 or more profundity fragments in the Martial Emperor's secret treasure? Do we really have to hand in every piece to the sect as well? Duan Lingtian looked Guo Chang in the eyes and casually asked. Not only would the profundity fragment allows the sect to give birth to a Martial Emperor, it would also help us enter the Martial Monarch stage if we can keep one for ourselves. Duan Lingtian's eyes shone brightly as he said this. The moment the words left his mouth, all the other 19 5-element sect's disciples immediately shifted their attention towards Guo Chang in unison. It was apparent that they were curious about this as well. After all, Duan Lingtian's words resonated with their thoughts. Of course, the profundity fragment would help the sect give birth to a Martial Emperor, and it would also help them enter the Martial Monarch stage in the future and become a Martial Emperor themselves. Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, Guo Chang became hesitant immediately. Sect leader, if the sect really wants us to hand in all of the profundity fragments that we obtain, I'm afraid not many of us will be interested in fighting for the profundity fragments inside the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. Duan Ling Tian continued to add on, after all, what use is there for us to fight till our very last breath for something that doesn't belong to us? What use is there for us to take as many as possible? Humph. The moment these words left his mouth, Cha Bai, the Peak Master of Fire Peak, who was standing by the side, snorted, what do you mean by, what use is there for us to fight until our very last breath for something that doesn't belong to us, and what use is there for us to take as many as possible? Don't you forget that you're all the disciples of the Five Element sect. The sect trained and fostered all of you. Now that the sect needs you, don't you think you should devote yourself entirely to your last breath for the sake of the sect? As he was speaking, Cha Bai swept a glance at the Five Element sect's disciples, including Duan Ling Tian. Peak Master Cha Bai, you're speaking with such a strong sense of awe-inspiring righteousness. Does this mean that you'll be willing to put your life at stake to fight for those profundity fragments that will eventually be handed to the sect if you're the one entering the Martial Emperor's secret treasure? Duan Ling Tian narrowed his eyes as he stared directly at him. Of course, Cha Bai replied as a matter of course, putting on an air that was saying, I'm willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of the sect. In that case, do you dare to swear by the 9 heavenly tribulation, Peak Master Cha Bai? Swear that if the words that you just said did not come from the bottom of your heart, you're willing to be killed in a strike by the 9 heavenly tribulation. A ridiculing smile crept up on the corner of Duan Ling Tian's mouth. Cha Bai's face turned pale at once. He did not expect Duan Ling Tian to bring up the 9 heavenly tribulation into the conversation again. However, did he really dare to swear by the 9 heavenly tribulation? Of course not. Looks like the words that you just spoke were uttered against your conscience, Peak Master Cha Bai. Duan Ling Tian stared deeply at Cha Bai and mocked him with a sneer. Many of the Five Element sect's disciples immediately cast a mocking glance at Cha Bai while some even snorted. We're duty-bound to find the profundity fragments for the sect. However, if there are no incentives, I'm afraid it's not enough to raise the sect's disciples' morale. Duan Ling Tian looked at Guo Chang again before he slowly proclaimed, Sect leader, please consider this for a while. When the disciples enter the Martial Emperor's secret treasure knowing that they will not get to keep the profundity fragments for themselves, how passionate do you think they would be when they're searching for the profundity fragments? At that time, their minds will be totally focused on the high-level items such as the concept fragments or spirit weapon instead. After all, no matter how many pieces of those items they get, it'll belong to them. When he reached this point, Duan Ling Tian paused for a moment before he changed his tone and said, however, if the sect promises that no matter who it is, we can keep the second or the third profundity fragments that we found for ourselves, I'm sure all of the sect's disciples will be willing to risk their lives to search for the profundity fragments instead. After all, a piece of profundity fragment is more than enough to change one's life. All of the sect's disciples present here were chosen by the sect. Each of them possesses a strong innate skill and comprehension. I'm sure they'll eventually make a breakthrough to the 9th level void transformation and comprehend the 9th level void transformation concept someday. To them, the profundity fragment is also an equally rare treasure. I hope that you can consider this, sect leader. I can't speak for everyone. In my case, I might be willing to search for the profundity fragments for the sect's sake in order to repay the debt for the training I received from the sect. However, if the profundity fragment is in the hands of a young powerhouse whose strength is on par or stronger than mine and could potentially kill me, I'll most likely not fight for that profundity fragment. After all, we only have one life in this world. It's extremely precious and valuable. No matter how attractive the profundity fragment is, in the end, it's still not ours, so there's no reason for us to risk our lives to fight for it. Duan Ling Tian addressed the group in one breath. Senior brother Ling Tian said it well. That's right. If all of the profundity fragments that we obtain have to be given to the sect, then this will definitely lower our enthusiasm to search and fight for the profundity fragments. Since it doesn't belong to us anyway, there's no reason for us to risk our lives for it. However, if we can keep the second piece of profundity fragment that we find, I'll definitely fight till my last breath to snatch it. After all, it'll play a role in whether or not I'll be able to become a martial emperor in the future. Same goes for me. Although senior brother Ling Tian is young, every word of his is a gem, and they completely resonate with my heart. Before Guo Chang could respond in time, a clamor had already broken out among the group of Five Element sect's disciples. From their words, it was obvious that they all agreed with Duan Ling Tian's opinion. Nangong Yi, Tan Huan, and Tian Zhen were no exception as well. Although Nangong Chen still had a cold look on his face, there were no doubts that he had the same thoughts from the constant gleaming of his eyes. Humph. Although Hu Fei was displeased that these words came out of Duan Lingtian's mouth, he had to admit that he actually agreed with Duan Lingtian as well. When Guo Chang saw the scene before him going out of control due to Duan Lingtian's remark, he could not help but let out a wry smile. He had to admit that Duan Lingtian's remark had not only resonated with the other five-element sect's disciples' hearts but with his own heart too. Although he would not be involved in the search for the profundity fragments, he could roughly understand the feelings of the people involved. It was exactly like what Duan Lingtian said. If the sect's disciples had to hand all of the profundity fragments to the sect no matter how many they obtained, their enthusiasm would be killed off no matter how loyal they were to the sect. Sect leader, I agree with Duan Lingtian about this matter. At this moment, Qi Yu, the Peak Master of Wood Peak, suddenly stepped out and voiced out directly, in order to stimulate the enthusiasm of the sect's disciples, I hope that you'll allow them to keep the second, third or even fourth profundity fragments that they managed to find in the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. I also agree with Duan Lingtian. This time, Yu Fang and Tianji Yu, the Peak Masters of Water and Earth Peaks respectively, chimed in as well. What about you, Peak Master Cha Bai? When he saw the three Peak Masters had stepped forward and agreed with Duan Lingtian's remark, he instinctively looked over at Cha Bai who did not say a word at all, or could it be that you disagree with Duan Lingtian? I have no objection. Although Cha Bai hated Duan Lingtian to the core, he knew that this was not the right time to be cocky. If he denied Duan Lingtian's remark, even the disciples from Fire Peak would hate him as well. All right. When Guo Chang saw all four Peak Masters agreed with him, he nodded his head and immediately looked at the 20 young disciples of the Five-Element sect, including Duan Lingtian. He announced clearly, I, Guo Chang, the sect leader of Five-Element sect, give you my word on behalf of the sect that no matter how many profundity fragments you obtain from the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, every one of you only need to hand in one to us. The disciple who hands in one to us will no longer need to hand in their spatial ring for us to check. Guo Chang announced in one breath. Suddenly, the eyes of all Five-Element sect's disciples shone brightly. Some began to breathe more rapidly than usual. All hail the sect leader. In this case, I must obtain at least 2 profundity fragments even if I fight till my last breath. Wait for me, Martial Monarch stage. Chaos broke out in the group of Five-Element sect's disciples. Each and every one of them was extremely excited. Guo Chang could not help but sigh emotionally when he saw this scene. He knew that the enthusiasm of the sect's disciples in finding and fighting for the profundity fragment had finally been successfully aroused. Now, all that was left was for them to enter the Martial Emperor's secret treasure and show off their skills. Duan Lingtian breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that situation had finally turned around. I hope that I'll be able to get my hands on one profundity fragment that's not useful to me in that Martial Emperor's secret treasure. It can also be considered as repayment for the grace of the Five-Element sect and for my training, he thought to himself. Previously, the Five-Element sect had given him 3 spirit fruits and even allowed him to enter the profound assimilation formation. It resulted in him making a great breakthrough in his strength. The training was also a sign of their grace after all. If he did not repay it, he would feel uneasy about it. However, I'm sure that the Martial Emperor's secret treasure won't have too many profundity fragments. If I really can't find any profundity fragments inside, I'll have to think of another way and hide the 3 profundity fragments I have on hand. Duan Lingtian was prepared for the worst scenario. It was impossible for him to hand in the 3 profundity fragments he had on hand. The Wind Profundity Fragment, Thunder Profundity Fragment, and Sword Profundity Fragment. These 3 profundity fragments were all profundity fragments that would be useful to him, so he would never hand them over. 923 Chapter 924, Crimson Moon Sect's Provocation. Let's go. Guo Chang, the sect leader of Five-Element sect, shouted lightly. He continued leading the group of Five-Element sect people, including Duan Lingtian, to fly forward to their destination. Very soon, they reached a hill that had a vast area. It stretched as far as the eyes could see. Suddenly, one of the Five-Element sect disciples cried out in surprise as if he had discovered something, "There's someone over there." Everybody immediately looked in the direction where he was staring, and they soon saw a group of people flying towards them swiftly from afar. In just a blink of an eye, this group of people arrived before them. The other party had also noticed them as well. Each and every one of them came to a halt and stood confrontationally before them. All of these people added together totaled to 24 people. There was a middle-aged man, 3 old men, and 20 young men and women that appeared like they were below 40 years of age. Other than the middle-aged man who was dressed casually, the 3 old men and the 20 young men and women were all wearing a red robe that had gold or copper trims. The 3 old men were wearing robes with gold trims while the 20 young men and women were wearing red robes with copper trims. The badges pinned on their chests looked like a reddish moon. Uniforms. Duan Lingtian raised his brows. Skywolf Fort immediately came to his mind. The group of vice fort masters from the Skywolf Fort and their disciples were all usually in some sort of uniform too. Skywolf Fort, we'll eventually settle the bill between us once and for all. The moment he thought about Skywolf Fort, Duan Lingtian's eyes immediately flashed with crimson red. The scene when Tom Yu died from blocking an attack for him when he was hunted by the 5 vice fort masters of Skywolf Fort was still vivid in his mind. A blood debt had to be repaid with blood. It's the people from Crimson Moon Sect. A loud clamor erupted next to Duan Lingtian's ears. Many of 5 Element Sect's disciples started to whisper to each other. The Crimson Moon Sect. Duan Lingtian finally understood when he saw the Crimson Moon badge pinned on the chests of the group of people before him. He was not unfamiliar with the Crimson Moon Sect at all. Originally when he was still staying with the Yi family at Drift Cloud Town, Yi Zan had mentioned Crimson Moon Sect to him before. For this reason, he knew that Crimson Moon Sect, just like 5 Element Sect, was also one of the 3 major forces in the eastern district of the Northern Desert. Their strength was in no way inferior to 5 Element Sect. Sect leader Ren Guochang greeted lightly when he saw the middle-aged man who led the group. I didn't expect that Crimson Moon Sect has also received the news. That middle-aged man, who's dressed casually, with a medium-built body and ordinary-looking features, is the sect leader, Ren Ji. It's said that his cultivation base has already reached the peak of the void. A familiar voice entered Duan Lingtian's ears instantly when he looked at the middle-aged man. It was none other than Chen Wei who was using voice transmission to tell him about the middle-aged man's identity. Likewise, I didn't expect news to travel so fast to your 5 Element Sect. However, only a capable man will be able to obtain the secret treasure left behind by the Martial Emperor. Ren Ji said as he swept a glance at Guochang indifferently before pausing for a little while. His sharp gaze swept past all the 20 young 5 Element Sect's disciples one by one before it landed on Duan Lingtian, and he burst out laughing. Sect leader Guo, looks like you really don't have any other candidates among the younger generations in 5 Element Sect, huh? Don't you think a young boy like him should just stay back and be nursed at home? Ha 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 ha. The moment these words left Ren Ji's mouth, the 3 old men behind him and the 20 young men and women burst out laughing instantly. Their laughter was full of mockery. Sect leader is right. Such a young boy should just stay home and drink milk instead. Look at him, I'm sure he's only around 25 years old. Is that trash seeking for his death in the Martial Emperor's secret treasure? Perhaps he feels that dying in the Martial Emperor's secret treasure is something to be proud of. Many of the Crimson Moon Sect's disciples commented without restraint as they mocked Duan Lingtian with their intentionally raised voice. They deliberately followed the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect's example and wanted to shame the 5 Element Sect on purpose. Humiliation. What a blatant humiliation. Despite the calm look on Duan Lingtian's face, his narrowed eyes gleamed coldly. It imperceptibly exposed his current feelings. His gaze was focused on the few Crimson Moon Sect's disciples who were mocking him happily without restraint. When the opportunity presented itself later, he would definitely kill these people off without mercy. His dignity should never be trampled on by anyone. Drink milk. Guochang's expression turned very ugly. The 3 forces of the Eastern District in the Northern Desert had no tolerance for each other all along. If any one of them had the ability to annihilate the other 2 forces, they would definitely not wait until the next day to make their moves. However, Guochang did not expect the Crimson Red Sect to be so blatant during an occasion like this. The moment they met, they had immediately mocked his 5 Element Sect's disciples. Sect leader Ren, as the dignified leader of a sect, don't you think it's a little inappropriate to treat a junior like this? Guochang asked in a deep voice. Inappropriate? No, I don't think so. Ren Ji replied nonchalantly with a calm expression. If he thinks what I said is incorrect, he can always come out and challenge any one of the 20 young disciples from my Crimson Moon Sect. If he can beat any one of them, I, Ren Ji, the sect leader of the Crimson Moon Sect, will take back my words from earlier. Swoosh. The instant the words left Ren Ji's mouth, a purple figure had already flew past the group of 5 Element Sect's people and stood right in front of Guochang, the sect leader of 5 Element Sect. It was none other than Duan Lingtian. Boy, you really dare to come out, huh? When Renji saw Duan Lingtian stepped out from the five-element sect's group, his eyes were immediately filled with surprise before he continued to mock him. I have to remind you though, you might lose your life by being so blindly courageous and impulsive. Sect leader Ren, do you intend to take back your words from earlier willingly? Duan Lingtian's gaze was extremely calm. Even when he was faced with Renji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect, he was neither haughty nor humble. With his indifferent tone, it was like he was talking to a person who was of no significance. Huh, Renji was astounded before bursting into a fit of laughter. Looks like you intend to seek death then. Lad, come and challenge me, I'll fight you. Oi, that boy from the five-element sect, come and challenge me if you have the balls. Me too, the 7 Crimson Moon Sect's disciples who trampled on Duan Lingtian's dignity with their words along with Renji's words earlier were looking at him as they shouted. It was apparent from the smug look on their faces that they looked down on Duan Lingtian. As he hovered in the sky, Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes and swept his gaze across the 7 Crimson Moon Sect's disciples who were still clamoring about. His cool voice resonated emotionlessly. Since the 7 of you want to fight me, then I'll just go along with your wishes. All 7 of you, come out now and fight with me together. The moment Duan Lingtian's words left his mouth, not only were the 7 Crimson Moon Sect disciples stunned, the remaining 13 Crimson Moon Sect's disciples were taken aback by his words as well. The 3 old men who were wearing red robes with gold trims and Renji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect, were also stunned. On the other hand, on the side where the five-element sect stood, the group of people under Guo Chong the sect leader did not even have a change in their expressions. It was like the scene before their eyes did not even warrant any change of emotions in their hearts. Humph, this guy is trying to show off again. Cha Bai, the Peak Master of Fire Peak, and his direct disciple, Hu Fei, snorted secretly. Huh, at this moment, Renji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect, had also noticed the group of five-element sect people's expressions. His heart jolted instantly. Could it be that he had made a wrong judgment? When Renji thought of this, he eyed the purple-clad young man in front of him from top to bottom with great attention. The eyes were so sharp as if it could pierce through everything, were tightly locked on Duan Lingtian as though he wanted to see through him thoroughly. Duan Lingtian's face remained indifferent, neither happy nor angry, as he faced Renji's scrutiny. Ha 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 ha, at the same time, the 7 Crimson Moon Sect's disciples who were just called out by Duan Lingtian regained their senses and burst into a fit of laughter. It was as if they had heard the biggest joke in the world. Wanting to challenge 7 at the same time alone. 7 of us simultaneously. Is he even sane? The 7 Crimson Moon Sect's disciples looked at Duan Lingtian with a sneer. The words that came out of their mouths were even ruder than before. At this time, even among the other 13 Crimson Moon Sect disciples, many people could not help but burst out laughing as well. Naturally, there were also a few of Crimson Moon Sect's disciples who were observant and had noticed the calm and indifferent looks on the group of five-element sect's people. When they shifted their glances towards Duan Lingtian, who looked as calm as before, a hint of dread could be seen in their eyes. What? You dare not? The expression on Duan Lingtian's face remained unchanged even when faced with the repeated provocations from the 7 Crimson Moon Sect's disciples. Hovering in the sky, the purple robe on his body billowed from the light breeze as he stared at the 7 people before his eyes. What? Did you just say that we dare not? Just because we didn't bare our fangs, you think that we're some sick cats, huh? Brothers, since he looks down on us so much, we must teach him a good lesson. The 7 Crimson Moon Sect's disciples were completely infuriated by Duan Lingtian. One by one, they flew out and surrounded Duan Lingtian as they glared at him viciously. Renji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect, frowned. He was beginning to vaguely feel that something was not right. That purple-clad five-element sect's disciple seemed to be a bit overconfident. Was he really that confident in himself? Or was he deliberately trying to look mysterious? At this moment, Renji saw the calm expressions on the five-element sect's people again, and he began to feel uncertain as well. However, since things had already progressed to this point, how could he stop it now? After all, he was the person who asked the other party to come out for a challenge. If he stopped the fight now, would it not be like slapping his own face? The 3 old men wearing the gold-trimmed red robe in Crimson Moon Sect also began to look more sullen. Similar to Renji, they could also faintly feel that something was wrong. Sect leader Ren, I remember you told me earlier that I might lose my life due to blind courage, right? Duan Lingtian, who was surrounded by the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples, looked at Ren Ji as he nonchalantly said, "Then, does this mean that you agree for me to fight with your 7 Crimson Moon sect's people to death, sect leader Ren?" Upon hearing this, Ren Ji's face fell instantly. However, there was no way for him to refute it at all. He indeed did say it previously. "You lad, looks like you really want to die, huh? We'll help you if you really want to die." The 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples who surrounded Duan Lingtian roared loudly one after another. The origin energy on their bodies whirled, and their concepts immediately rose. 924 Chapter 925, Slicing 7 Throats with One Slice of Sword. When they saw how the 7 people from Crimson Moon sect were about to launch their attacks on Duan Lingtian, everyone, be it the people from Crimson Moon sect or 5 Element sect, was watching the scene intently. Among the people from Crimson Moon sect, dread immediately filled the eyes of Ren Ji the leader, the 3 old men and a few other Crimson Moon sect's disciples, who were more observant. Duan Lingtian's confidence elicited a sense of ill omen from the bottom of their hearts. On the other hand, the rest of Crimson Moon sect's disciples sneered as they watched Duan Lingtian, who was surrounded by their 7 brothers from the same sect. Their gazes were so cold that it was as if they were looking at a dead man. In their opinion, this 5 Element sect's disciple would definitely die. Among the people of 5 Element sect with Guo Chong as the leader, all of them thought Duan Lingtian would immediately cast his innate ability and create an illusion to disrupt the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples. At that time, the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples would flail around uselessly before him and be finished off in one blow. Whoosh, 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 the origin energy on the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples suddenly burst out. Their concepts merged with the origin energy like shadows, and 100 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons began to appear above each of their heads. Among the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples, the person who was the strongest had a cultivation base at the 5th level void interpretation and a comprehension of the 6th level void interpretation concept. The weakest one had a cultivation base at the 3rd level void interpretation with a comprehension of the 3rd level void interpretation concept. Whoosh, 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 as though they had planned beforehand, the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples launched their attacks at the same time. Without the use of spirit weapons, their fists and palms all struck out and charged towards Duan Lingtian, who was surrounded by them. Nearly 1,000 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons formed a circle in the sky. They bared their fangs and claws as they pounced towards Duan Lingtian as if they were about to tear him into pieces. Boom, 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 the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples charged as they attacked, be it with their palms or fists. They carried the strength of 100 ancient horned dragons as they ripped the sky apart. A series of shrill and ear-piercing air blast was set off at the place that they passed through. At the place where the air blast was set off, the air flow in the air compressed and immediately exploded, setting off waves and waves of wind. As the wind spread, it transformed into flurries of strong hurricanes that blew the 5 Element sects and Crimson Moon sect's disciples who were watching by the side. It was to the extent that some of them had to squint their eyes. Only the senior officials from 5 Element sect and Crimson Moon sect, and those disciples with a slightly higher cultivation base were watching the scene before their eyes intently without missing even a single detail. When Duan Lingtian saw how the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples were charging at himself and were aiming at his vital parts, Duan Lingtian's eyes narrowed into slits. A cold gleam flashed across his eyes. The instant the cold gleam flashed across his eyes, his hands were already lifted up. The origin energy in his hands immediately converged and formed a white 3-foot-long blade out of thin air. The origin energy converged and became a sword. In the next moment, it seemed like became incorporeal as it transformed into a sword that was solidified from purple electrical snakes. At the same time, streaks of purple lightning and thunder appeared on the sword like shadows that were intertwined with one another. All of this happened with the speed of light. Apart from the senior officials and a few other stronger disciples from the 5 Element sect and Crimson Moon sect, everyone else could not clearly see what Duan Lingtian was doing at all. Swoosh! In the next second, a sword whistling sound resonated and died down as soon as it appeared. Accompanied by the ear-piercing thunder, everybody on the scene could hear the sound very clearly. Whoosh! Almost at the moment when the sword whistling sound that was accompanied by the thunder came to an abrupt halt, all the crowd could see was a flash of purple lightning that rose up to the sky before it vanished in the encirclement of the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples in a blink of an eye. Boom, 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 When the purple lightning soared up to the sky, everybody could see that the throats of the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples, who looked threatening earlier, were spurting out blood continuously. At the same time, their bodies collided brutally with flesh and blood flying everywhere. Due to inertia, their fast speed could be likened to 7 sports cars that collided on Earth where Duan Lingtian lived in his past life. They collided until everything was completely smashed. The entire place became deadly silent instantly when everyone saw the 7 disfigured bodies. Whoosh! Concurrently, above the purple figure that was hovering in the sky, the heaven and earth phenomenon that did not even have the chance to solidify dissipated immediately. Duan Lingtian stood straight with both of his hands behind him as he hovered in the sky. The purple robe on his body billowed from the breeze, and his handsome face was extremely cold. A pair of calm eyes were looking directly at the 7 fallen bodies without any hint of emotion at all. The 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples had been annihilated by him with just a slice to the throat. One slice that killed 7 men. What a fast sword. That sword contained the thunder concept. Although his attack was very brief, and the heaven and earth phenomenon did not solidify into form, the speed in which he launched his attack earlier is at least 200 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons or more. Horror instantly dawned on the senior officials of the Crimson Moon sect, including Renji the sect leader. Earlier, they had seen Duan Lingtian's attack clearly with their eyes. They also saw that with just one slice, the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples were all dead. Naturally, they immediately wanted to step out and rescue them at that moment. However, they noticed that the senior officials from 5 Element sect had their auras focused on them just as they were about to make their moves. They knew that if they made a move, they would be stopped by the senior officials from 5 Element sect. For this reason, they could not make any move at all. Instead, they could only watch in pain as their 7 lively Crimson Moon sect's disciples turned into 7 disfigured bodies. How did he become so powerful? He's only so young. With a ghastly pale face, Renji clenched his teeth and stared fixedly at the purple figure in the sky. He was itching to make a move and kill him off. However, he also knew that as long as Guo Chong, the sect leader of 5 Element sect, was there, he would not be able to kill Duan Lingtian at all. At this moment, the 3 old men wearing the gold-trimmed red robes, who were the 3 great vice sect leaders, were all looking extremely pale as well. Despite their fury, none of them made any move towards Duan Lingtian. The incident today was their mistake no matter how they tried to justify it. Moreover, they might not necessarily win against the 5 Element sect's people even if they planned to play rough. The 5 peak masters of 5 Element sect had been fighting with them for so many years now. Their strengths were on par with each other. They could not do anything to the other party, and the other party could not do anything to them either. If they were to battle it out, both sides would eventually sustain great losses. This was not something they wanted to see. Good job, lad, Guo Chong, the sect leader, said. Guo Chong and the senior officials of the 5 Element sect, Qi Yu, Yu Fang and Tianji Yu, the peak masters of wood, water and earth respectively, were looking at Duan Lingtian with a face full of pleasant surprise. Initially, they thought Duan Lingtian would use his innate ability to slowly torture them to death when he faced the 7 disciples from Crimson Moon sect. It did not cross their minds that Duan Lingtian would choose to use the most simple method and kill them directly with just a slice of his sword when faced with the threatening 7 disciples from Crimson Moon sect. At this moment, when they saw the pale faces of the Crimson Moon sect's senior officials, bright smiles lit up their faces instantly. Humph! Cha Bai, the peak master of Fire Peak, snorted secretly to himself. Although he enjoyed this ending very much, he could not help but feel displeased the moment he recalled the fact that it was Duan Lingtian who launched the attack. If the person who had annihilated the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples was his own direct disciple, Hu Fei, he would definitely be so happy that he would even laugh out loud in his sleep. Haha, Duan Lingtian. Great job. Huang Daniu laughed excitedly as he pumped his fist in the air. Chen Wei, who was standing at the side, smiled as well. The rest of the 5 Element sect's disciples, including Nangong Yi, Tan Huan, and Tian Zhen, had a brilliant smile on their faces. The only exception was Hu Fei. Even a rare faint smile could be seen playing on the corner of Nangong Chen's mouth. Previously, the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples persistently humiliated and mocked Duan Lingtian. Look at how well that situation turned out. Every one of them became mere souls under senior brothers Lingtian's sword. That's right, when they surrounded senior brother Lingtian, they looked so arrogant. However, in just a blink of an eye, they're all gone. It's a pity that I'm still too weak, so I didn't see clearly how senior brother Ling Tian launched his attack. The slice of his sword was incredibly fast. The five-element sect's disciples were discussing it animatedly. Each of their faces was filled with an excited smile. At this moment, they were no longer divided into gold, wood, water, fire or earth peaks. Instead, they all belonged to only one sect, the five-element sect. They shared wealth and woes with the five-element sect. Contrary to the excitement that the five-element sect's disciples felt, the remaining 13 Crimson Moon sect's disciples looked extremely pale in comparison. Just one blow and the 7 Crimson Moon sect's disciples were instantly killed off by an awfully young disciple from the five-element sect. He annihilated 7 men with just a slice to the throat. Until this moment, they were still in a state of disbelief. Some of them even wondered if they were actually dreaming, and they could not help but extend their hands to pinch their own thighs. The pain that came from their thighs seemed to indicate that everything that had happened earlier was not a dream after all. It was indeed real. What a fast sword! Senior brother Hong Qing, did you see that clearly? A Crimson Moon sect's disciple asked another disciple from the same sect by his side with a dismal look on his face. The Crimson Moon sect's disciple who was known as senior brother Hong Qing had a strong and tough body with a pair of unruly eyebrows. His pair of eyes were brimming with vigor while his cold and aloof face appeared extremely determined. The extraordinary aura that radiated out of his entire body was not on the same level as the other Crimson Moon sect's disciples. Yes, I did. His cultivation base must be higher than the 8th level void interpretation. Moreover, the thunder concept that he demonstrated earlier must also be at the 8th level void interpretation concept at least. Hong Qing nodded his head, and his sharp gaze was filled with killing intent. From the beginning until now, it did not leave the purple figure in the sky at all. It was as though he could not wait to kill him off with his own hands. Senior brother Hong Qing, you mean even without a spirit weapon, he's able to cast the strength of 200 ancient horned dragons with just his origin energy and thunder concept? The Crimson Moon sect's disciple who asked the question earlier could not stop himself from gasping in shock. Without any spirit weapon, he had a strength of 200 ancient horned dragons. One could not help but tremble against such terrifying strength. Sect leader Ren, I'm sorry that you lost so many of your young powerhouses that were about to enter the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. Guo Chong flashed Renji a faint smile as he looked at him. However, there was no hint of apology at all on his face. It appeared to have a hint of ridicule instead. With a ghastly pale face, Renji answered in a low voice, Guo Chong, don't be too proud yet. Those people that he killed were only some weaker disciples that we, Crimson Moon sect, sent out. 925 Chapter 926, Chi Yu's Past. Master. At this time, one person, a man with a sturdy body, stepped out of the Crimson Moon sect and went to stand beside Renji. The young man's eyes gleamed coldly as he stared at the purple figure in the distance. I want to have a battle with him, a life and death battle. The young man's voice was filled with an extreme coldness that it made other people who heard it felt as if they had just fallen into a thaw hole. It's senior brother Hong Qing. Before Renji could respond, many of the Crimson Moon sect's disciples' eyes lit up instantly. As they looked at the young man, their eyes were filled with veneration. Senior brother Hong Qing is the proud disciple of the sect leader. He's only 38 years old, and his cultivation base has already reached the 9th level void interpretation. Just some time ago, he managed to comprehend the 1st level advanced fire concept after coming out of the profound assimilation foundation. Moreover, senior brother Hong Qing has also comprehended the 2nd level intermediate saber concept. Even without any spirit weapon, his full strength amounts to 350 ancient horned dragons. Now that senior brother Hong Qing has decided to make his move, that kid will definitely die. Well, unless he dares to turn down the challenge. I'm sure he doesn't have the guts to accept the challenge. The Crimson Moon sect's disciples buried their heads together in a heated argument. Their voices spread without restraint and reached the ears of the 5-element sect's people, and it made them turn pale immediately. The young man that was standing beside Renji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon sect, had already comprehended the void transformation concept. Moreover, his cultivation base was already at the 9th level void interpretation. Additionally, he had also comprehended another concept, the 2nd level intermediate saber concept. Just his origin energy alone, the 9th level void interpretation already amounted to the strength of 120 ancient horned dragons. The first level advanced fire concept amounted to the strength of 200 ancient horned dragons. The second level intermediate saber concept amounted to the strength of 30 ancient horned dragons. Indeed, this Hong Qing could unleash the strength of 350 ancient horned dragons even without the help of any spirit weapon. The Five Element Sect's people, including Guo Chong, the sect leader of Five Element Sect, and a few peak masters, immediately turned glum. Although they knew Duan Lingtian was a variant and could cast his innate ability to construct that mysterious illusion, they did not know if the innate ability that was cast by Duan Lingtian's spiritual energy could affect a 9th level void interpretation martial artist or not. If he could not be affected, Duan Lingtian would be in a disadvantageous position. After all, the Duan Lingtian they knew had only comprehended the 9th level intermediate thunder concept and the 3rd level intermediate wind concept. When it came to real strength, he was not a match for this Hong Qing, the proud disciple of the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect. When Hong Qing personally requested to challenge Duan Lingtian, Ren Ji's face was still a little distressed as he carefully studied the changes on the Five Element Sect's senior officials' faces, including Guo Chong, the sect leader of Five Element Sect. This was because he did not know that if that Five Element Sect's disciple had given his all or not when he killed the 7 Crimson Moon Sect's disciples earlier. Before he could grasp the background of the other party, he would not let his most valued disciple take such a risk. However, the moment he saw the expressions of Guo Chong and the others became sullen, he knew immediately that Guo Chong and the rest did not think Duan Lingtian would be able to defeat his disciple. Ha 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 ha, good, good, Ren Ji immediately burst out laughing. After a moment, his laughter finally died off as he stared Guo Chong in the eyes and snorted, "Guo Chong, weren't you so pleased with yourself earlier? Now, my useless disciple is going to challenge that Five Element Sect's disciple of yours. Does your Five Element Sect dare to accept this challenge?" Before Guo Chong could open his mouth to reply, Tianjiyu already snorted coldly as he loudly mocked, "Humph. A 38 years old man challenging our Five Element Sect's disciple who is below 30 years old. Ren Ji, how low can you stoop? Shorty, I'm talking to Guo Chong right now. Who says that you can interrupt our conversation?" Ren Ji said scornfully to Tianjiyu in a casual manner. What did you say? Height had always been a taboo topic for Tianjiyu. Usually, in the Five Element Sect and Earth Peak, nobody dared to use the word short in front of him. Now that somebody had disregarded his taboo and openly revealed his scars, he was instantly infuriated. The vast origin energy on his body whirled and transformed into khaki energy that enveloped his entire being. In the next moment, Tianjiyu disappeared before the eyes of all Five Element Sects and Crimson Moon Sect's disciples. Naturally, he did not actually disappear. It was just that his speed was so fast that it was difficult for the naked eyes to see. So fast, Duan Lingtian who was hovering in the sky above narrowed his eyes instantly. This was his first time seeing Tianjiyu, the Peak Master of Earth Peak, make his move. In his opinion, Tianjiyu was nothing but an inscription master who was far from being handsome and had a particularly small stature. It did not even cross his mind that Tiangu's strength was actually at the 8th level void transformation. At this moment, he used his cultivation base that had already entered the 9th level void interpretation and his spiritual energy that had elevated up to 1st level void transformation to probe Tiangu's cultivation base. After his spiritual energy had made a breakthrough to the 1st level void transformation, Duan Lingtian could see the cultivation base of all void transformation martial artists. For instance, Guo Chong, the sect leader of Five Element Sect, and Qi Yu, the Peak Master of Wood Peak, were both at the 9th level void transformation. As for Cha Bai and Yu Fang, the Peak Masters of Fire and Water Peak respectively, were both at the 8th level void transformation, just like Tianjiyu. Perhaps, Duan Lingtian would not raise any suspicion if he probed Guo Chong, Qi Yu, Cha Bai, and Yu Fang who were not inscription masters. However, if he probed Tianjiyu, he would definitely be discovered immediately. This was because Tianjiyu was an inscription master. For this reason, he had always held himself back from probing Tianjiyu. Only at this moment when Tianjiyu had no time to attend to other matters that Duan Lingtian finally extended his spiritual energy to probe his cultivation. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Tianjiyu quickly appeared before Ren Ji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect. Before all of the Five Element Sects and Crimson Moon Sect's disciples, including Duan Lingtian, had time to react, they heard a loud noise that sounded like thunder rumbling in their direction. Boom! Then, they finally saw it. Tian Gu's small body immediately flew out, and it was only until 100 meters away later that he finally managed to stabilize his body. Barf! Tian Gu's body shuddered, and his face turned red instantly as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Father! Tian Zhen's face turned pale immediately. Hastily, he flew forward to check on Tian Gu's injuries. Renji! Guo Chong's face darkened at once when he saw Tian Jiyu, the Peak Master of Earth Peak, was injured. When he looked at Renji again, his eyes were filled with extreme coldness. We, Crimson Moon Sect, were the first to provoke your five-element sect. For that reason, our people were killed by you. We admitted that that was our wrong, so we did not pursue the matter. However, your people are the one provoking us now, and he's not even dead yet. Just like this and you can't hold yourself back anymore. Renji mocked as he cast an aloof glance at Guo Chong. Guo Chong's face darkened a little more, but he did not make any move at all. As the other side had put it, this time, it was indeed five-element sect who had started it. Naturally, he also knew the reason why Crimson Moon Sect did not seek to avenge the 7 Crimson Moon Sect's disciples that were killed by Duan Ling Tian. It was not because they knew they were at fault. Instead, they were worried that they themselves and five-element sect would both end up suffering great losses. At this moment, he did not make any move, not because he felt that his own side was at fault. Instead, he was also worried that five-element sect and Crimson Moon Sect would be weakened by the fight. If five-element sect and Crimson Moon Sect suffered great losses, it would only be an advantage for the Wind Sand Sect, which was the final major force among the 3 in the eastern district of the Northern Desert. Yes, that's right, we, from five-element sect, really can't hold back any longer. Just as the atmosphere became somewhat weird, a cold voice reverberated in the air and shocked the five-element sect's disciples to the core. They quickly looked at the owner of the voice. Peak Master. Duan Ling Tian hovered in the air as he looked down. He saw that the person who spoke out was none other than Chi Yu, the Peak Master of Wood Peak. Chi Yu stood out and looked at Renji in the eyes with no fear. Chi Yu, what? The injury from 20+ years ago has already healed. Renji looked at Chi Yu and scoffed. Chi Yu, that time, you were widely recognized in the eastern district of the Northern Desert as a genius martial artist that was hard to come by in every 100 years. It was to the point that many people even said that you'd become the first martial monarch in the eastern district of the Northern Desert in 1,000 years. Unfortunately, that injury from 20 over years ago must not have fully healed yet, right? I'm sure you're no longer as strong as you were 20 over years before. If you weren't injured 20 over years ago, I'd probably be slightly afraid of you. However, right now in my eyes, you're no different from that shorty at all. As Renji reached the end of his sentence, he cast another glance at Tian Jiyu, who had just returned to stand behind Guo Chong. For a time, Tian Jiyu was so infuriated that he threw up another mouthful of blood. The face of Tian Zhen, who was supporting Tian Jiyu, immediately darkened as he glared fiercely at Renji. At this moment, he hated himself for being too weak and was not able to avenge his father. Whoosh! Upon hearing Renji's words, all of the five-element sects and Crimson Moon Sect's disciples, including Duan Ling Tian, were completely dumbfounded. Their eyes fell on Chi Yu instantly. It did not even cross their minds that this middle-aged man standing before their eyes actually had such a glorious past. The genius martial artist that was hard to come by every 100 years in the eastern district of the Northern Desert. The person who was widely acknowledged as having the potential to become the first martial monarch in the eastern district of the Northern Desert in 1,000 years. I didn't know that Peak Master had that kind of past, Duan Ling Tian could not help but sigh emotionally. Actually, it was not only Duan Ling Tian, the group of Wood Peak's disciples, including Huang Daniu and Chen Wei, could not help but sigh as well. They also knew nothing about Chi Yu's past. Why don't you come and try it out for yourself to see if I'm still as strong as I was 20 over years ago? Chi Yu, who was in the limelight, finally spoke faintly. The moment these words left his mouth, he disappeared into thin air before the eyes of the five-element sects and Crimson Moon Sect's disciples, including Duan Ling Tian. The speed was so fast that it was horrifying. Right at this moment, the face of Renji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect, turned glum immediately as if he had noticed something. Horror suddenly dawned on his face. The instant his expression changed, his entire being vanished in front of Duan Ling Tian and the others. 926 Chapter 927, Complete Annihilation. Wham! A loud noise resonated from the endless explosions. It was like the roar of thunder piercing the ears. Everyone, including Duan Ling Tian, immediately looked towards the source of the sound. There was a wave of turquoise energy that collided with an azure green energy. When they exploded, the air flow became turbulent immediately. Chi-Yu, who was behind the turquoise blue energy, and Ren-Ji, who was behind the azure green energy, appeared out of thin air. However, they vanished again before everyone's eyes as soon as they appeared. At the same time, a huge wave of air was set off at the center where the two waves of energy collided and swept out in all directions. Strong gusts of wind with a great oppressive force blotted the sky and covered the ground as it fell and pressed on everyone. Apart from the senior officials of the Five-Element sect and the Crimson Moon sect who were not affected, all of the Five-Element sects and the Crimson Moon sect's disciples, including Duan Lingtian, were pressed down to the point that they were bent over. Some of the Five-Element sect and the Crimson Moon sect's disciples who had lower a cultivation base abruptly dropped down 100 meters before they could finally stop their tracks and soar back up into the sky against the strong wind current. What a powerful force! Is this the energy of a 9th-level void transformation martial artist? The Five-Element sects and the Crimson Moon sect's disciples were struck dumb with amazement. 9th-level advanced water concept and 9th-level advanced wind concept. However, it seems like they're still withholding their power. Although he could not see Chi-Yu's and Ren-Ji's movements clearly, Duan Lingtian, who possessed the memories of the Martial Emperor's two reincarnations, had a rough idea of what happened when the two waves of energies collided earlier. Whoosh, whoosh. Finally, Chi-Yu and Ren-Ji came into view again under the watchful eyes of the others. Before the crowd even had time to figure out what was happening, a tremendous energy was already emanating out of their bodies and swept out without warning before crashing upon each other. Wham! This time, the energies that collided were not at the same level compared to the previous one. Horrifying airwaves swept out, and strong hurricanes that covered the entire ground and sky crashed down immediately. At this time, even the faces of the 3 peak masters from the Five-Element sect and 3 vice sect leaders from the Crimson Moon sect began to turn grave. A layer of light origin energy rose out from their bodies and spread over them as it covered their bodies and forcibly resisted the invasion of the strong winds. I can't stand it anymore. At this moment, all of the Five-Element sects and Crimson Moon sect's disciples, including Duan Lingtian, dropped down from the sky similar to dumplings that were dumped into a hot pan. They disappeared from the sky in an instant. All Duan Lingtian could feel was a strong irresistible wind that pressed down on him and forced him to fall straight down. Even when he cast a suitable concept to help him, he still continued to fall. Other than the 9th-level advanced water concept, it turns out that the Peak Master has also comprehended the 9th-level advanced fire concept. It seems like he actually comprehends both water and fire concepts at the same time. No wonder he was once widely regarded as someone who could become the first martial monarch in the eastern district of the northern desert in 1,000 years. When Duan Lingtian recalled the scene that he saw before the strong winds covered the entire sky and ground, he could not suppress the shock that he felt. It turned out that Chi-Yu was a powerhouse who was at the peak of the void stage. Although he had his own suspicion about it previously, he was not entirely sure. He finally confirmed his suspicion. The Peak Master comprehends the water and fire concepts that are completely antagonistic to each other. Moreover, both of them have also reached the 9th-level void transformation concept stage. Even if he doesn't have the profundity fragment, he'll most likely be able to make a breakthrough to the martial monarch stage and become a martial monarch very soon. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. A powerhouse who had reached the peak of the void stage and had comprehended 2 types of conflicting 9th-level void transformation concept, like the water and fire concepts, would have an easier time in breaking through to the next stage. Due to the fact that water and fire were antagonistic to each other, these 2 concepts would exert a greater pressure on the person to some extent, and in turn, it would spur the powerhouse who had reached the peak of the void stage to comprehend profundity. Once the powerhouse who had reached the peak of the void stage had comprehended profundity, it was equivalent to obtaining a pass to enter the martial monarch stage. As long as his origin energy was further elevated, he would then be able to successfully break through to the martial monarch stage. Duan Lingtian also noticed that the sect leader of the Crimson Moon sect was a powerhouse who had reached the peak of the void stage as well. When he collided with Chi-Yu earlier, he had also demonstrated the 9th-level advanced thunder concept apart from the 9th-level advanced wind concept. If that Ren-Ji is killed by Peak Master, how good would it be if Peak Master gives me the 2 concept fragments that Ren-Ji would leave behind? Duan Lingtian, who was constantly falling due to the pressure from the strong winds, thought happily to himself. Renji, the sect leader of the Crimson Moon sect, was a powerhouse who had reached the peak of the Void stage. If he died, he would leave behind a piece of 9th level Wind concept fragment and 9th level Thunder concept fragment. Both of these concept fragments were very useful to Duan Lingtian. They were much better than the Wind and Thunder concept fragments that he had in hand. Chi-Yu, it seems like I've underestimated you. I didn't expect that your injury has healed after 20 over years. Moreover, you even managed to make more progress after your downfall and elevated your cultivation base to the peak of the Void stage. A loud voice that contained a hint of dread resonated from the sky. This time, the strong hurricanes that were raging below finally began to show signs of stopping. It allowed all of the 5 element sects and Crimson Moon sect's disciples, including Duan Lingtian, to rise up to the sky again. After Duan Lingtian had returned to high altitude, he looked towards Renji, the sect leader of the Crimson Moon sect, who was standing at an even higher altitude. The remark earlier was made by Renji. At this moment, Chi-Yu was standing not far in front of Renji as they faced each other. They were locked in a stalemate. Neither happy nor angry, his face looked of calm. It was so calm that his countenance betrayed nothing of his thoughts. Today, due to my respect for you, Chi-Yu, our Crimson Moon sect will not have a dispute with your 5-element sect. Let's go. After taking a deep breath, Renji came up with a reason to extricate himself from the situation. He proceeded to leave with the Crimson Moon sect's people. This Renji is scared now, huh? Duan Lingtian, whose attention had never left Renji, clearly noticed the deep look of dread that could be seen in Renji's eyes. It was obvious that he was afraid of the current 5-element sect. Indeed, come to think of it, in the 5-element sect, Guo Chong, the sect leader, must be a powerhouse who was at the peak of the Void stage as well. Now that Chi-Yu had entered the picture, how could Renji not be afraid? Trying to leave. It's too late now. Just as Renji was about to leave, Chi-Yu vanished from his spot in flash. When he re-emerged again, he was already standing before Renji, blocking his path. Chi-Yu, don't overdo it. Renji's face turned utterly grave. At this moment, when Renji's face changed its color, a wanton laughter reverberated in the air. That laughter came from Guo Chong, the sect leader of 5-element sect. Ha 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 ha, Renji, everyone from Crimson Moon sect will have to remain here today. As he reached the end of his sentence, his voice turned chilly instantly. Guo Chong, you, Renji narrowed his eyes. He instantly sensed what Guo Chong was about to do. However, he got cut off right away before he could even finish his sentence. This was because Chi-Yu had just launched an attack on him. Before the eyes of the 5-element sects and Crimson Moon sect's disciples, including Duan Lingtian, Chi-Yu, and Renji disappeared again in the air. I'll take care of that 3 old men. Cha Bai, Yu Fang, you two lead the sect's disciples and annihilate all the disciples from Crimson Moon sect. Tianji, you're responsible for protecting the sect's disciples' well-being. Guo Chong's loud and clear voice resonated in the air like thunder as he passed down his orders. Today, we'll cut off the 4 most important pillars and all of the future pillars of Crimson Moon sect. When we return, we'll go to Crimson Moon sect's base and completely wipe them out from the eastern district of the northern desert. A bloody massacre was implied in Guo Chong's words. His intention was very clear. Today, everyone from Crimson Moon sect would remain here. Upon hearing Guo Chong's words, the eyes of everyone from 5-element sect lit up immediately. Crimson Moon sect is doomed. Duan Lingtian muttered to himself. As for the 3 vice sect leaders and the 13 remaining disciples from Crimson Moon sect, including Hong Qing, horror dawned on their faces instantly. Some of them were so scared that their bodies began to tremble fiercely as cold sweat began to form on their foreheads. They knew that this time 5-element sect was about to slaughter their Crimson Moon sect. Meanwhile, Renji, who was being chased by Chi-Yu, cried out loudly and gave an order to the people from Crimson Moon sect, run. The instant they heard Renji's order, the people from Crimson Moon sect did not dare to hesitate anymore. Without the slightest delay, they fled in all directions one after another. The position was very clear now. The 5-element sect had 2 powerhouses who were at the peak of the Void stage. That meant that they could suppress the Crimson Moon sect. Flee, 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 comma. The group from Crimson Moon sect, including the 3 vice sect leaders, scattered on command. They fled disorderly in all directions. One of the vice sect leaders was flying extremely fast. He was the first one to flee. In just a blink of an eye, he turned into a small black dot before Duan Lingtian's eyes. Duan Ling Tian's eyes gleamed as he muttered, 9th level void transformation. However, if sect leader casts his attack, heal. Before Duan Ling Tian could even finish his words, he saw the small black dot came to a halt suddenly before dropping from the high altitude. He was dead. At the same time, he also saw that after the death of the 9th level void transformation vice sect leader from Crimson Moon sect, Guo Chang appeared in front of the other two vice sect leaders from the Crimson Moon sect successively and instantly killed them. In the face of a powerhouse who was at the peak of the void stage, an ordinary 9th level void transformation and two 8th level void transformation martial artists were like papier match that crumbled with just a blow. After Guo Chang killed the three vice sect leaders from Crimson Moon sect, he flashed again and vanished from his spot. He was on his way to help Qi Yu. It was as easy as a snap of the fingers for two powerhouses who were at the peak of the void stage and had comprehended two 9th level void transformation concepts, to kill a powerhouse who was at the peak of the void stage who had also comprehended two 9th level void transformation concepts. Kill, 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 comma. At this time, loud battle cries entered Duan Ling Tian's ears. He could see that under the leadership of Cha Bai, Yu Fang, and Tianji Yu, Nangong Chen, Nangong Yi, Huang Daniu and the rest of the Five Element sect's disciples had begun to round off and kill the remaining Crimson Moon sect's disciples. For a moment, the group of Crimson Moon sect's disciples, who did not have any intention to fight, died one by one. There were only a few people left. Whoosh! In the meantime, a swift figure struck Duan Ling Tian. He narrowed his eyes coldly at once, Hong Qing. The person who came was none other than Hong Qing, the proud disciple of the sect leader of Crimson Moon sect. Five Element sect wants to annihilate my Crimson Moon sect, so let me exterminate the Five Element sect's genius disciple. With a pair of bloodshot eyes, Hong Qing charged towards Duan Ling Tian like a lightning. 927 Chapter 928, Heart-stopping performance. Hong Qing, the disciple of the sect leader of Crimson Moon sect, was the favored one in Crimson Moon sect. Apart from his strength that was far superior to his peers, he also possessed an extremely rational mind and calm judgment. He was able to remain cool-headed in the face of disasters. After seeing Qi Yu, the peak master of Wood Peak in Five Element sect displayed a strength that was at the peak of void stage that was comparable to his master, a sense of danger began to rise in his heart. Just as he expected, his master and Qi Yu were evenly matched in power. Neither side got the better of the other. Guo Chang, the sect leader of Five Element sect, who used to be the only powerhouse who was at the peak of void stage in Five Element sect, had just single-handedly killed the three vice sect leaders of Crimson Moon sect the moment his master shook off his bindings. The other Crimson Moon sect's disciples were also being massacred by the Five Element sect's disciples under the guidance of the three peak masters. When his master, Ren Ji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon sect, ordered them to flee, he did not flee because he knew that he would not be able to escape them. He would become an easier target to hunt if he had chosen to escape. For this reason, he made himself scarce until he saw the purple-clad young man who was standing not too far away. It instantly reminded him of the fact that this young man had just killed 7 of their Crimson Moon sect's disciples with just a slice of his sword. The instant he thought of the purple-clad young man's age, jealousy rose in his heart immediately. He was not even 30 years old yet he had already possessed a cultivation base at the 8th level void transformation and had possibly comprehended the intermediate thunder concept that was at the 8th level or higher. Without any spirit weapon, he had demonstrated a strength that was more than 200 ancient horned dragons. When Hong Qing was at that age, his strength was not even half of Duan Ling Tian's strength. Although he was jealous, he could sense that the purple-clad young man played quite an important role in Five Element sect. He must be the main subject of cultivation in the Five Element sect or perhaps, the next sect leader of Five Element sect. For this reason, he had made up his mind since he knew that he would definitely die today. He had decided that he would kill the purple-clad young man and destroy the future pillar of Five Element sect when everyone's attention was diverted. Die. When Hong Qing pounced on Duan Ling Tian, his eyes were completely bloodshot. A spirit saber appeared in his hand out of thin air. Blazing flames rose up from the saber as it transformed into a flaming saber that emanated a wave of fierce aura. Whoosh! The heaven and earth energy whirled in the sky, and the heaven and earth phenomenon rapidly solidified into form. 440 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons bared their teeth and fangs at Duan Ling Tian. It looked like they were about to tear him into pieces when they bore down on him menacingly. Hong Qing was a martial artist at the 9th level void interpretation. When his origin energy fully burst out of his body, His strength was equivalent to 120 ancient horned dragons. The spirit saber in his hand was a grade 2 spirit weapon. It would be able to boost 80% of the owner's origin energy, which was equivalent to 90 over ancient horned dragons. The 9th level intermediate fire concept was equal to the strength of 100 ancient horned dragons, while the 2nd level intermediate saber concept was equal to the strength of 30 ancient horned dragons. When Hongqing unleashed his entire energy without any reservations, his strength would be equivalent to more than 440 ancient horned dragons. Swish! The flaming saber in Hongqing's hand was swift and dexterous as it sliced through the sky and charged at Duan Lingtian like a shadow. Explosions were set off at the place that it had gone past, and it continued exploding for a long period of time. Waves of hot aura swept out in all directions and transformed into gusts of hot wind. It blew, and many of the 5-element sect's people shuddered for a moment before they finally realized what was happening. Shit, it's that Hongqing. He's trying to kill senior brother Lingtian. One of the 5-element sect's disciples, who responded the fastest, shouted. Horror immediately dawned on the 2 peak masters and 18 disciples of 5-element sect. Duan Lingtian, Huang Daniu, who had just slaughtered a Crimson Moon sect's disciple, immediately turned to look at Duan Lingtian the moment he heard that shout. The instant he saw that Hongqing's flaming blade was just a foot away from Duan Lingtian, his face turned pale at once. Shit, I didn't notice that Hongqing. Other than Cha Bai, the peak master of Fire Peak, who had a cold look on his face, the faces of Yu Fang and Tianjiu, the peak masters of Water and Earth Peaks respectively, turned grave as well the moment they saw this. However, it was too late now even if they wanted to go to his rescue. Hongqing's flaming saber was about to fall on Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, the Nangong twins, Tan Huan, Tianjiu, and the rest of the 5-element sect's disciples, hearts leapt. At this moment, they could only hope that Duan Lingtian's innate ability would work on Hongqing. Otherwise, he would definitely die. Duan Lingtian, I'll avenge my 7 Crimson Moon sect's brothers who died today. Avenge my Crimson Moon sect. Killing you is equivalent to cutting off the 5-element sect's arm. When Hongqing was charging towards Duan Lingtian, his voice transmission pierced through Duan Lingtian's ears. He shouted in a frenzy, and it made Duan Lingtian's eardrums shake from the extreme vibration. Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes immediately when he saw the flaming blade that was fast approaching him. This flaming blade that looked extremely fast to the others appeared awfully slow in his eyes. It was so slow that he even had the time and mood to reply Hongqing's voice transmission. With just the strength of only 440 ancient horned dragons, I really wonder where you get your confidence from. Duan Lingtian's calm voice transmission entered Hongqing's ears and made his face darken slightly. You're just bluffing, Hongqing roared. The blazing flames on the flaming saber in his hand broke out and enveloped Duan Lingtian from the top. If this flame really touched him, he would definitely die, if not crippled. Swoosh! The flaming saber pierced through the air and set upon him as if God's brush drew a boundless wildfire that shrouded Duan Lingtian. Senior brother Lingtian. When everyone saw Duan Lingtian was shrouded by the boundless wildfire from the flaming saber, many of the 5-element sect's disciples could not help but shut their eyes right away. They refused to watch his blood splattering all over the place. However, in the next moment, the sound from a series of explosions that were set off by the flaming saber suddenly came to a halt. Curiously, they opened their eyes again. When they looked at the far distance, their eyes narrowed immediately. Disbelief immediately crept up on their faces. It was as though they had just seen something that would be unforgettable in their entire lifetime. This, from Cha Bai, Yu Fang, Tianjiu, the peak masters of Fire, Water, and Earth Peaks, to the 5-element sect's disciples like Huang Daniu, Shen Wei, the Nangong twins, Tan Huan, and Tian Zhen, all of them were staring in bewilderment with their mouths agape. Goodness, what did they just witness? In the distance, Hongqing was still there, and the flaming saber was still there as well. However, the great wildfire that accompanied the slicing motion of the flaming saber was currently being forced back by a blood-curdling force that rose up to the sky. At the same time, Guo Chong and Qi Yu, who had just killed Ren Ji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon sect, by joining their forces, happened to witness this scene as well. They were instantly dumbfounded. Under the watchful eyes of the others, the purple-clad young man merely stood there with his purple robe that looked as though it had transformed into purple flames that were billowing in the light breeze. At this moment, gusts of khaki energy rose up from around the purple flame, and in the khaki energy, there were streaks of lightning that resembled purple electrical snakes that emitted a threatening aura. Moreover, there was another wave of sharp aura that rose up from the purple flame. From afar, it looked like a gigantic sword that sailed across the sky with tiny star-like and sword-shaped energy around it. However, none of these caught the crowd's attention. What attracted their attention was the purple-clad young man's hand that was lifted up in the sky. His hand was directly in front of his brows. The blazing flaming saber that was so close to him was locked in between two of his fingers. He had seized the naked blade with just his bare hands. The five-element sect's disciples who were watching from the side instantly felt chills running down from their heads. Did senior brother Ling Tian just took on that blow from Hong Qing's spirit saber with his bare hands? Hong Qing is a 9th-level void interpretation martial artist, and the spirit saber in his hand is a grade 2 spirit saber. Moreover, he has already comprehended the 9th-level intermediate fire concept and 2nd-level intermediate saber concept. When he unleashes his full power, it's equivalent to the strength of more than 440 ancient horned dragons. And yet, it was all blocked by senior brother Ling Tian. And it's only with 2 fingers. As the five-element sect's disciples buried their heads together in heated discussions, many of them could not help but gasp in shock as well. How powerful was that person who managed to take on a blow that contained the strength of more than 440 ancient horned dragons with his bare hands? Look, the heaven and earth phenomenon above senior brother Ling Tian is beginning to solidify into form, somebody shouted. Everyone from the five-element sect, including the senior officials, immediately gazed at the space above Duan Ling Tian. The silhouettes of ancient horned dragons that were gathered there reflected in their eyes clearly. It was a total of 500 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons. The silhouettes of 500 ancient horned dragons were grouped systematically in the sky. At least, that was what Guo Chong, the sect leader of Five-Element Sect, and Qi Yu, the peak master of Wood Peak, could see. As powerhouses whose cultivation bases were at the peak of the void stage, their eyesights were not something an average person could match. They could see that the 500 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons were being grouped respectively in this manner: 200, 100,000, 100, and another 100 silhouettes. This Duan Ling Tian has already broken through to the void transformation. Guo Chong was extremely dumbfounded. He could not help but look at Qi Yu. I also have no idea when he managed to break through to the first-level void transformation. By right, just with that 2 spirit fruits alone would not be enough for him to make such a huge leap from the 7th-level void interpretation to the first-level void transformation. Qi Yu shook his head. As he reached the end of his sentence, his face became dazed and blank. Perhaps, he had some special encounter. Guo Chong's gaze once again turned to the purple-robed figure in the distance as he let out a sigh. I can still accept the fact that he's already at the first-level void transformation. However, not only did this little fellow manage to comprehend the 9th-level intermediate thunder concept, he actually comprehended the 9th-level intermediate earth concept and 9th-level intermediate saber concept as well. What an insane power of comprehension. A wry smile crept up to the corner of Guo Chong's mouth. He's a monster through and through. Qi Yu smiled wryly as well. Duan Ling Tian, whose hand were shrouded with the first-level void transformation's origin energy that was merged with the 3 9th-level void interpretation concepts, stared directly into the eyes of Hong Qing. Hong Qing's face had long turned ghastly pale. Duan Ling Tian asked nonchalantly, "Now, do you still think I'm bluffing?" 928 Chapter 929, Hong Qing's death. You. Upon hearing Duan Ling Tian's words, Hong Qing regained his senses. There was fear in his eyes, and he could not even complete his sentence. He desperately tried to retract his spirit saber with all his might, but he realized that the spirit saber that was held in the purple-clad young man's hand felt like it was rooted to the spot. It did not even budge an inch. "Why, you're a void transformation martial artist?" Hong Qing gasped and asked in a trembling voice. He stared at Duan Ling Tian with dread in his eyes. Duan Ling Tian did not answer Hong Qing. Nobody noticed when, but a bright smile had already crept up on Duan Ling Tian's face as he asked rhetorically, "Why? I thought you were going to kill me." The bright smile on Duan Ling Tian's face entered Hong Qing's sight. It was exactly like a devil's smile. A gleam flashed quickly across Hong Qing's pair of terrified eyes. Without any hesitation, he swiftly let go of the spirit saber. Whoosh! After Hong Qing abandoned the grade 2 spirit saber, he immediately turned around and fled. His speed was as fast as lightning. Although Hong Qing's silhouette got farther and farther away, Duan Ling Tian continued to stand in the same spot with seemingly no plans to give chase at all. The hand that was holding the spirit saber with 2 fingers were now grasping the spirit saber with his entire palm as he weighed it gently. Why didn't senior brother Ling Tian chase after him? Could it be that senior brother Ling Tian decided to just let him off like that? Many of the 5 Element sect's disciples were puzzled. On the contrary, the senior officials from 5 Element sect fixed their gazes on the spirit saber that was held in Duan Ling Tian's hand as though they were absorbed in their thoughts. That was the 2nd grade spirit saber left behind by Hong Qing. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Duan Ling Tian proceeded to make his move. He suddenly lifted the hand that was holding the grade 2 spirit saber and drew it to the back. Like a giant bow, it was stretched tautly to its limit until the muscles of his back began to slightly quiver. Very soon, a layer of khaki energy covered the grade 2 spirit saber and streaks of purple lightning surrounded it. Bursts of sharp aura emitted out of the spirit saber as well. Whoosh! The awfully quiet 500 ancient horned dragon silhouettes above Duan Ling Tian suddenly whirled. Another 150 silhouettes of the ancient horned dragons appeared from thin air next to the 500 ancient horned dragons. That was the boost from the grade 2 spirit saber. Kill! Duan Ling Tian's gaze turned grave instantly. He hurled the grade 2 spirit saber in his hand that contained his full strength. Like an arrow that was shot out of a strong bow, its speed was so fast that it was completely astounding. Whoosh! The grade 2 spirit saber swiftly fired out. As it was hurled out, more than 650 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons in the air charged forward. It was even faster than Hong Qing, who had fled in advance. As Hong Qing was fleeing, he mobilized the heaven and earth energy above his head. 350 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons immediately appeared out of thin air. At this moment, apart from Duan Ling Tian's full energy, the grade 2 spirit saber that was hurled out contained an extra boost of energy from the grade 2 spirit saber itself. It gave the saber a speed that was twice as fast as Hong Qing's. One could easily imagine the outcome of such a gap in their energy. In just a short while, the grade 2 spirit saber caught up to Hong Qing before it pierced his body from behind. The saber entered his body white in color and exited entirely red. It pierced his body cleanly, leaving him dead on the spot. Senior brother Ling Tian is so strong. See, I told you so. How could senior brother Ling Tian possibly let Hong Qing go? It turns out that he could not even be bothered to give chase to Hong Qing himself. All he needed to do was throw the saber out to kill him. Previously, Hong Qing said something about senior brother Ling Tian being a void transformation martial artist, right? When senior brother Ling Tian threw the grade 2 spirit saber earlier, the heaven and earth phenomenon above his head had an additional 150 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons. This means that the energy contained in his origin energy is more than 200 ancient horned dragons. When the origin energy of a first-level void transformation martial artist is completely unleashed, it's equivalent to the energy of 200 ancient horned dragons. It seems like senior brother Ling Tian is indeed a first-level void transformation martial artist now. After discovering that Duan Ling Tian was a first-level void transformation martial artist, the 5 Element sect's disciples could not help but be taken aback. Huang Daniu appeared in front of Duan Ling Tian and sized him up with a gaze that seemed like he was looking at a monster. After a while, he finally asked with a face full of disbelief, Duan Ling Tian, since when did you make a breakthrough to the void transformation? He remembered that before they made their journey here, Duan Ling Tian was only at the 9th level void interpretation. The journey only took slightly over a month, and Duan Ling Tian managed to have another breakthrough again. And it was all the way to the void transformation. Just a few days ago, Duan Ling Tian answered with a faint smile. Although Duan Ling Tian was caught off guard by his own breakthrough to the void transformation a few days ago, he was not surprised at all. After all, the bottleneck led to the first-level void transformation was already very loose before he left the 5 Element sect. He only needed to give it a little push in order to break through. During this journey, he had used his spare time to cultivate a little, and finally, he managed to complete the breakthrough just a few days back. The origin energy in his body went through a complete transformation like a carp that transformed into a dragon as he swiftly broke through to the first-level void transformation in just one leap. That's right. When Duan Ling Tian cast his attack and mobilized his heaven and earth energy to solidify more than 500 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons earlier, it seemed like he has the earth concept other than the thunder concept. Not just the earth concept, there was the sword concept as well. When he unleashed all 3 concepts together, the energy is equal to the energy of 300 ancient horned dragons. Senior brother Ling Tian's strength is indeed appalling. Very soon, the Five Element Sect's disciples broke out in a heated discussion again. Duan Lingtian. Hu Fei stared at Duan Lingtian with endless hatred in his eyes as he stood at a corner inconspicuously. Despite that, a hint of dread could be seen in the depth of his eyes. Duan Lingtian's strength managed to elicit shock and fear from the bottom of his heart. He knew that if Duan Lingtian really wanted to kill him, he would have no way to escape at all. Since I can't touch you in the light, I'll make my move in the dark instead. When we arrive at the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, all of the sects, young powerhouses will be entering together. I don't believe you'll be able to defeat everyone. The corner of Hu Fei's mouth lifted up to form a devilish smile as though he was hit by a realization. A plan to deal with Duan Lingtian formed in his heart. He believed that as long as this plan was successfully implemented, Duan Lingtian would not be able to survive even if he had 10 lives. Oh, Duan Lingtian immediately noticed the poisonous snake-like gaze coming from Hu Fei's direction. His face turned solemn immediately as a cold gleam flashed across his eyes. This Hu Fei's really like a haunting ghost that's unwilling to leave. I must kill him once I have the opportunity in the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. Hu Fei made Duan Lingtian extremely uncomfortable. This feeling was no different from Zishang last time. Although this kind of person might not be able to do anything to him in the light, it was still hard for Duan Lingtian to guard against him effectively if this kind of person decided to do anything to him in the dark. Duan Lingtian immediately sentenced Hu Fei to death in his heart. Standing afar, the Nangong twins' gazes were focused on Duan Lingtian. Nangong Yi could not help but groan as he cursed out loud, this Duan Lingtian's really a freak. Of course, there was no malice in his tone at all. Although Nangong Chen did not speak a word at all, there was still a glimpse of light in his eyes. It was as though Duan Lingtian was a bright lamp that lit up the direction of his advancement. Since this Duan Lingtian is able to make a breakthrough to the void transformation, this means that he must have comprehended at least one void transformation concept. While the Five Element Sect's disciples were in awe with Duan Lingtian's strength, the Five Element Sect's senior officials could not help but recall the 3 concepts that Duan Lingtian had demonstrated earlier. None of the 3 concepts was at the void transformation concept. Otherwise, Duan Lingtian's strength would not merely be at 500 ancient horned dragons. At this moment, they were hit by a shocking realization. Duan Lingtian is still hiding a void transformation concept. Cha Bai, Yu Fang, and Tianji, the peak masters of Fire Peak, Water Peak, and Earth Peak respectively, exchanged glances with each other. Each of them could see the astonishment in each other's eyes. Cha Bai's face paled instantly from the shock. In the end, he took a deep breath as though he had made up his mind about something. Hu Fei. He immediately looked at his direct disciple, Hu Fei, and said with a grave voice through voice transmission, from this moment onwards, forget about all the enmity between you and Duan Lingtian. You must not provoke him. Hu Fei, who was still proud of his own plan, was stunned for a while when he heard the voice transmission from Cha Bai. Before he had time to respond, Cha Bai's voice continued to enter his ear. I suspect that this Duan Lingtian is still hiding his true strength when he launched his attack earlier. He may well have comprehended another void transformation concept. Void transformation concept. Hu Fei blanched the moment he heard Cha Bai's words, the void transformation concept. At first, Hu Fei was still skeptical. He thought that his master had made a mistake. However, after listening to Cha Bai's explanation, he had no choice but to believe it even if he did not wish to believe it. Yes, master, I won't take the initiative to provoke him next time, Hu Fei replied Cha Bai after he took a deep breath. All the same, he had another idea in his mind despite his reply. Duan Lingtian, so what if you have comprehended the void transformation concept? At that time when you become the target for all in the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, you'll still die in the end. As he thought of this, a hint of coldness flashed in the depth of his eyes as if he was about to devour a certain somebody. Asking him to let Duan Lingtian walk away just like that. Impossible, unless he died first. Naturally, Cha Bai was not privy to Hu Fei's thoughts. The moment he heard Hu Fei's promise, he let out a sigh of relief. He knew that right now, let alone his disciple, Hu Fei, even he would have to think twice before provoking the current Duan Lingtian unless he was sure he could kill Duan Lingtian to remove the cause of future troubles. Otherwise, what was waiting for him ahead would be an endless revenge from Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, you really hide them well. The 2 figures disappeared into thin air above the sky and reappeared again near Duan Lingtian. Guo Chong scrutinized Duan Lingtian. Hold it. At this time, Qi Yu, who was standing next to Guo Chang, threw out 2 streaks of lights with just a flick of his hand. It went all the way to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian hastily reached out a hand to catch it. When he looked down, he noticed that they were actually 2 concept fragments. 2 concept fragments, one was blue, and one was purple. It shone with deep intense color, and it was obvious that their levels were not low. Are these the 2 concept fragments from the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect, Renji? Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up instantly, and his breathing quickened as well. 929 Chapter 930, The Empyrean Temple's Abbot. Renji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect, was a powerhouse at the peak of the Void Stage who had comprehended the 9th level Advanced Wind concept and the 9th level Advanced Thunder concept. For this reason, the 2 concept fragments in his body were 9th level Wind concept fragment and 9th level Thunder concept fragment. Both were top-ranking concept fragments that could also be considered as treasures. Just with these 2 concept fragments, Duan Lingtian could raise his Wind and Thunder concepts to the 9th level Advanced Stage in no time. At that time, he would be able to comprehend the profundity with just one more step. Thank you, Peak Master. Duan Lingtian immediately thanked Qi Yu. After all, this surprise was too huge indeed. Meanwhile, when the 3 other Peak Masters and the disciples from the 5-element sect shifted their gazes toward Duan Lingtian, there was an additional hint of envy and jealousy. That was 2 9th-level concept fragments after all. Even the 5-element sect only had a few pieces of the concept fragment in their collection. However, Duan Lingtian alone currently possessed 2 of them. However, none of them said anything about it even though they were envious. Put aside the fact that those were Qi Yu's loot, so it was entirely up to him how he wanted to distribute them, even if the loots were owned by the sect, just from the strength that Duan Lingtian had demonstrated earlier that far surpassed the rest of 5-element sect's disciples, made him more than qualified to be given the 2 concept fragments by the sect. Junior brother Qi Yu, you hid your strength even better than Duan Lingtian did. If you had told me earlier that you've already reached the peak of the Void Stage, there'd be no need for me to fear Renji at all earlier. Guo Chang, the sect leader of 5-element sect, lamented as he shifted his glance from Duan Lingtian and stared at Qi Yu who was standing next to him. If he had known earlier that Qi Yu was a powerhouse at the peak of the Void Stage earlier, he would certainly be very eager to launch an attack when Crimson Moon Sect made their appearance. As one of the 3 major forces in the eastern district of the Northern Desert, the enmity between 5-element sect and Crimson Moon Sect had endured for thousands of years. The 2 major sects were always thinking about annihilating each other all the time. However, none of them had been able to truly win due to their strengths being equal. Now that Qi Yu had comprehended 2 kinds of 9th-level void transformation concepts and possessed the strength at the peak of the Void Stage, the balance between the 2 major forces had been thrown off. The 2 powerhouses who were at the peak of the Void Stage from 5-element sect joined forces and easily annihilated Renji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect. Moreover, they had also killed the 3 vice-sect leaders of Crimson Moon Sect. Upon hearing Guo Chang's words, everybody from 5-element sect simultaneously shifted their attention from Duan Lingtian to Qi Yu as if they had planned for it beforehand. At this moment, Qi Yu became the focus of attention of the crowd instead. I didn't expect Peak Master Qi Yu to be so powerful. From now on, Peak Master Qi Yu is no longer the second strongest person in our 5-element sect. Instead, he's a powerhouse who can stand side by side with the sect leader and a person who's competent enough to be known as the strongest powerhouse in the 5-element sect along with the sect leader. How unlucky those Crimson Moon Sect's people were. Especially that Renji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect, who provoked our 5-element sect from the very beginning. He was fearless, thinking that he had a strong support. The expression on his face the moment he found out that Peak Master Qi Yu is also a powerhouse at the peak of the Void Stage is still clearly etched in my mind. I saw it as well, that expression was of utter horror and fear. I'm pretty sure he regretted provoking us at the moment he was dying. Now that the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect is dead, Crimson Moon Sect would cease to exist except in name. After we return from the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, sect leader and the rest will definitely wipe Crimson Moon Sect's name off Cloud Continent completely. Each and every one of the 5-element sect's disciples erupted in an uproar. Excitement and elation were apparent in between their brows as they continued to discuss animatedly. The peak of the Void Stage. The gazes of those people who stared at Qi Yu were filled with idolization. The other 3 peak masters of 5-element sect, Cha Bai, Yu Fang, and Tianji Yu, looked at Qi Yu with a complicated look in their eyes. It did not cross their minds that Chi Yu possessed such a terrifying strength. The moment they recalled how they treated Wood Peak previously, they could not help but break out in cold sweat. It was fortunate that Chi Yu did not fuss and bother with them. Otherwise, they would not be able to defeat him even if the three of them joined forces. A powerhouse at the peak of Void Stage was just too appalling. After all, it meant that he already had half his foot in the Martial Monarch stage. Yu Fang cast a glance at Cha Bai and Tianjiu before she said to them with voice transmission, both of the 9th void transformation concepts that Chi Yu comprehended are water and fire concepts. Even if none of the sect's disciples managed to obtain any profundity fragment from the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, it would not take him long to make a breakthrough to the Martial Monarch stage. Upon hearing her reminder, Cha Bai and Tianjiu were hit by the realization. When Chi Yu was battling with Ren Ji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon Sect, he indeed demonstrated the 9th level advanced water concept and 9th level advanced fire concept. Perhaps he would be able to break through to the Martial Monarch stage a step earlier than the sect leader to become a Martial Monarch powerhouse. Tianjiu gasped in surprise. Peak Master Chi Yu, congratulations. Yu Fang and Tianjiu exchanged glances before looking at Chi Yu simultaneously and congratulated him. They congratulated him for possessing the strength at the peak of the Void stage. Even Cha Bai, the peak master of Fire Peak who was usually incompatible with Chi Yu, had also put down his ego and congratulated Chi Yu, congratulations. From his words, it was obvious that he had decided to submit. Ha ha ha, Hu Fei, look at your own grave expression. Do you regret betraying our Wood Peak now? Suddenly, a laughter rang out in the silence. It was none other than Huang Daniu who was standing afar as he looked at Hu Fei who had a solemn expression on his face. Hu Fei's face darkened immediately as he glared fiercely at Huang Daniu for exposing his thoughts in front of so many people. Despite that, he did not dare to retort at all. Put aside the fact that Huang Daniu and Duan Lingtian were on friendly terms with each other, he did not even dare to provoke Huang Daniu alone. Although Huang Daniu needed to borrow earth energy during the Battle of the Five Peaks, the current Huang Daniu could easily defeat him even without the earth energy. After coming out of the profound assimilation formation, Huang Daniu had already comprehended the 9th level advanced earth concept, and he even displayed a strength that was not in any way inferior to himself when he was battling Crimson Moon Sect's people earlier. He knew that the current Huang Daniu could easily defeat him even without the use of earth energy. Duan Lingtian, when Hu Fei felt the mocking gazes from the surroundings shifted to himself, his face turned grave immediately. His pair of icy eyes glared at Duan Lingtian who was standing afar. Until now, he still held Duan Lingtian responsible for his lack of progress in the profound assimilation formation. When Duan Lingtian noticed Hu Fei's glare, he could vaguely figure out his thoughts. Duan Lingtian looked at him coldly as his voice transmission pierced sharply through Hu Fei's ears, idiot. You. Hu Fei's face was ashen. Flustered and exasperated, his organs became agitated and with a barf, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Why did Hu Fei spit out blood suddenly? He must be regretting his decision after seeing the strength that Peak Master Chi Yu demonstrated and the compelling dominance that Wood Peak displays. It seems like he's mad at himself for making such foolish choice last time. What's the point of being mad now? An ungrateful bastard will always be an ungrateful bastard. Although the 5-element sect's disciples were discussing this under their breaths, they did not bother lowering their voices. For this reason, each and every word was heard by Hu Fei clearly. Once again, he was so mad that he spat out another mouthful of blood. When Guo Chong noticed Cha Bai's ashen face, he helped alleviate the atmosphere and called out to everyone before taking the lead to fly forward, let us continue our journey. Everyone from 5-element sect immediately followed closely behind him. We're not there yet. After flying for a period of time, Duan Lingtian frowned as he looked at a hill under his feet. An astonished voice rang by Duan Lingtian's ears suddenly. One of the 5-element sect's disciple cried out while he pointed to the front, There are many people there. Could it be that the Martial Emperor's secret treasure is actually there? His voice was filled with excitement. Upon hearing this, many of the 5-element sect's disciples, including Duan Lingtian, looked in the direction he was staring at. After passing by a towering mountainous forest, a gigantic valley appeared before their eyes. Two groups of people were hovering above the valley. Similar to 5-element sect, both groups had about 20 over people. There's a group of Baldies there. Could they be the people from the Empyrean Temple, one of the 4 major forces in the southern district of the Northern Desert? Only the Empyrean Temple in the entire northern desert has so many bald monks. When Duan Lingtian noticed the group of people who were made up of many kasaya-wearing monks with dots on their heads, many of the Five Element sect's disciples had already spoken out. The Empyrean Temple, Wei Ming, Wei Jing, and that little monk as well. Very soon, Duan Lingtian discovered three familiar figures in the group of people that were made up of 50% bald monks. They were none other than the three Empyrean Temple monks that he encountered in Skywolf Fort previously. Abbot Wei Kong, it has been a long time since we last met. How are you doing? The Five Element sect party flew in and attracted the Empyrean Temples and the other group's attention. Guo Chong immediately looked in the direction of the Empyrean Temple, his gaze landed on the old monk who led the group. The old monk had 9 dots on his scalp. He appeared kind and benevolent with his 2 white brows. He was Abbot Wei Kong from the Empyrean Temple. The abbot of the Empyrean Temple was also the highest leader in the Empyrean Temple. Amitabha, sect leader Guo, greetings to you too, Wei Kong replied as he narrowed his eyes to look at Guo Chong. All 10 of his fingers were linked together, he was extremely attentive to his ethics. Duan Lingtian. At this moment, a cry resonated among the people of the Empyrean Temple. It attracted the attention of many people. Everyone saw a monk disciple who was not bald among the Empyrean Temple's temple. He was staring at a particular person clad in purple among the Five Element sect's disciples. Senior brother Lingtian is known among the Empyrean Temple as well. Many of the Five Element sect disciples marveled, "Whoa! Senior brother Lingtian is indeed extraordinary. Even the Empyrean Temple from the far southern district of the northern desert knows him too." 930 Chapter 931, Sun Moon Sect. When Duan Lingtian realized someone who was not Wei Ming, Wei Jing nor that little monk, had called out his name, he could not contain the curiosity in his heart as he cast a glance at the source of the voice. With just a glance, he could immediately discern that the figure was familiar. It was a figure that he had seen before. Oh Chen. The moment Duan Lingtian saw this young man standing among the Empyrean Temple's people, he lifted his brows as he finally recalled the identity of this monk disciple from the Empyrean Temple. He was Oh Chen, the strongest youth in the Darchu dynasty whom he had met once during the martial competition of the 10 dynasties previously. He could still remember clearly that after the martial competition had ended, Oh Chen was the first person among the young talents from the 10 great dynasties who chose to join the Empyrean Temple. At this moment, he could not help but feel a wave of affection meeting someone who used to be one of the young talents in the 10 great dynasties. Duan Lingtian. Oh Chen's cry also shocked Wei Ming, Wei Jing and the young monk standing next to them. For a moment, their eyes also fell on Duan Lingtian. They were rather surprised to see Duan Lingtian among the group of Five Element sect's people. As far as they knew, Duan Lingtian seemed to have joined the Blade sect after the martial competition of the 10 dynasties had ended. By right, he should have made his appearance together with the Blade sect's people. However, Duan Lingtian had arrived on the scene before the Blade sect's people. Moreover, it was with the Five Element sect's people. They also knew that Five Element sect was one of the 3 major forces in the eastern district of the northern desert. They were very clear about this. Duan Lingtian, we meet again, a familiar voice transmission suddenly sounded in Duan Lingtian's ears. Duan Lingtian could tell immediately that the voice belonged to the young monk standing next to Wei Ming and Wei Jing. That's right, we meet again. However, I still have no idea how I should address you. I'm Zanbei. The young monk continued to use his voice transmission to converse with Duan Lingtian. Zanbei, I'll keep that in mind, Duan Lingtian replied again. Don't forget, you and I still have a promise that we've not fulfilled, Zanbei voiced out again. Of course I remember, Duan Lingtian responded. He still remembered when they were at the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, this Zanbei had challenged him to a battle. At that time, he had accepted the challenge instantly without giving it much thought. However, the challenge had yet to be carried out until now. That's great, Zanbei nodded his head in satisfaction. When most of the people had their attention on Duan Lingtian, a loud voice suddenly resonated and took many of them by surprise. So, your little benefactor Duan. I've been looking forward to meeting you. It was none other than Wei Kong, the abbot of Empyrean Temple. He looked at Duan Lingtian and greeted him with his 10 fingers interlocked. You flatter me, abbot. When Duan Lingtian saw that Wei Kong, the leader of one of the 4 dignified major forces in the eastern district of the northern desert, took the initiative to greet him, he was not surprised even though he was a little taken aback. It seemed like Wei Ming and Wei Jing had told Wei Kong everything about him. In Wei Ming's and Wei Jing's eyes, he was a variant who could utilize his innate ability. Be it his talent or strength, they were both far superior to other ordinary martial artists. Wei Kong must have greeted him solely because he was a variant. The fact that O Chen greeted Duan Lingtian only took a few people by surprise. However, when Wei Kong took the initiative to greet Duan Lingtian and even said, "I've long been looking forward to meeting you," it completely stunned everyone present. After all, who the hell was Wei Kong? He was the abbot of Empyrean Temple, a powerhouse who was already at the peak of the void stage. However, at this moment, such a person had taken the initiative to greet a five-element sect's disciple who looked barely 25 years old. They were completely flabbergasted by this. Even Guo Chong, the sect leader of five-element sect, could not contain his bewilderment as well. He knew this old monk Wei Kong very well. He knew that it was absolutely impossible for Wei Kong to take the initiative to greet a person whom he did not have a good opinion of. In other words, Duan Lingtian had a special place in Wei Kong's eyes. Guo Chong could not contain his curiosity, so he asked Wei Kong, "Abbot Wei Kong, you've heard of Duan Lingtian?" "Yes." Wei Kong nodded his head faintly before he continued, "Although I've no idea how little benefactor Duan joined five-element sect, five-element sect will be even more powerful with little benefactor Duan's help. Congratulations, sect leader Guo. Haha, you have good eyes, Abbot Wei Kong." Upon hearing his words, Guo Chong burst out laughing immediately. To be honest, he had quite some faith in Duan Lingtian's strength. At this moment, if Duan Lingtian claimed to be the second strongest young powerhouse in five-element sect, nobody would dare to claim the #1 spot at all. Without a doubt, there were many people from the Empyrean Temple who were staring at Duan Lingtian with a perplexed look as well. They really could not figure out why a young man who seemed to be only about 25 years old was worthy enough to garner such bizarre praise and recognition from their Empyrean Temple's abbot. Did the abbot make a mistake? Just him alone will make the five-element sect more powerful. Many of the monk disciples from Empyrean Temple buried their heads together to discuss the matter as they expressed their suspicion. This five-element sect in Empyrean Temple. It seems like the both of you really have a lack in people recently. Just a little kid who's barely 25 years old could also be called a treasure. How ridiculous. A derisive snort that was neither loud nor faint resonated from the other group in the distance. Upon hearing the words, everyone from five-element sect and Empyrean Temple, including Duan Lingtian, shifted their attention to the source of the voice. It turned out that the voice belonged to the person who was the leader of the group. It was an old man who was fully clothed in black. The old man's face was aloof, and it was accompanied by a pair of sharp, intense eyes. His eyes were cold, and it filled others with dread to look him in the eyes. Similar to that old man, the other 4 old men standing behind him and the rest of the 20 young men and women were also fully clothed in black. Furthermore, each and every one of them was also wearing a badge that was pinned on their chests. The man leading the group had a badge with the design of a blazing sun, while the 4 old men standing behind him in a row had badges with the design of a moon on their chests. As for the remaining 20 young men and women, the design on their badges was a star. The Sun-Moon sect, one of the 2 major forces in the western district of the northern desert. Guo Chong muttered under his breath after he saw the clothing worn by that group of people. His gaze landed on the old man who was leading the group before he asked, "You must be the sect leader of Sun-Moon sect, right?" "That's right, it's me," the old man replied nonchalantly. "How should I address you, sect leader?" Guo Chong asked again. "Chen Feng," the old man replied, slightly impatient. "Sect leader Chen Feng." Guo Chong nodded before he asked again, "Earlier, did you say that five-element sect are lacking people?" Chen Feng snorted and answered with disdain, "Well, isn't that the case? Just a little kid and you people from five-element sect and Empyrean Temple are treating him as a treasure. In our Sun-Moon sect, a disciple at that age has no qualifications to leave the sect at all." Guo Chong narrowed his eyes. A smirk crept up the corner of his mouth as he asked directly, "A little kid? It seems like you look down on our disciple, sect leader Chen Feng. I wonder how many of your 20 young disciples can win against him." Upon hearing Guo Chong's words, Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. He knew that the sect leader wanted to use him as cannon fodder to teach the sect leader and the disciples of the Sun-Moon sect a lesson. Although he was not fond of being used as a cannon fodder, he did not know why he was not completely averse to it this time. In fact, he was kind of looking forward to it. Perhaps it was because Chen Feng, the sect leader of Sun Moon Sect, used him as a mean to provoke Five-Element Sect and Empyrean Temple earlier. Win against him. Upon hearing Guo Chang's words, Chen Feng looked at Duan Lingtian and sized him up before he burst out in a fit of laughter. Just this little kid alone. Sun Moon Sect can simply send out any one of our young disciples, and it'll be more than enough to defeat him. Guo Chang's narrowed eyes suddenly opened wide. The smile on his face grew even wider as he openly asked, "In that case, shall we try?" Guo Chang's boldness immediately took Chen Feng by surprise. He began to get an indistinct feeling that something was not right. "Why, sect leader Chen Feng, don't tell me that you don't dare to give it go." Guo Chang flashed a mocking smile. "Who said I dare not?" Chen Feng was immediately angered by Guo Chang. He immediately turned towards a Sun Moon Sect's disciple and said coldly, "Lu Kai, come out and fight against this little kid from Five-Element Sect." The disciple who was called out was a young man who appeared to be around 35 years old. He had a slender figure and an aloof face. Coupled with his black clothing, he gave off an aura of coldness. "Yes." Upon hearing Chen Feng's words, Lu Kai responded and stepped out without any hesitation. The pair of emotionless eyes locked onto Duan Lingtian immediately. Duan Lingtian's face darkened a little. Just a glance from the opponent was enough to make him feel as though he had fallen into a thaw hole. It was apparent that he possessed extraordinary strength. In the next moment, Duan Lingtian extended his spiritual energy and quickly probed his opponent's cultivation base. The 9th level void interpretation. It did not cross Duan Lingtian's mind that Chen Feng would be so cautious. Although it was just the beginning, he had instantly asked his disciple who was at the 9th level void interpretation to battle him. With the strength that this young disciple possessed, he was most likely one of the best among the 20 disciples of Sun Moon Sect. Whoosh! Under the watchful eyes of the others, Duan Lingtian flew out and stood directly opposite Lu Kai. His calm face did not betray any emotions at all. At this moment, be it the Five-Element Sects or the Empyrean Temples or the Sun Moon Sect's disciples, every one of them was staring intently at the two men who were locked in a stalemate. They were filled with anticipation for the battle between the two of them. When Guo Chang saw Duan Lingtian and Lu Kai were ready to battle, Guo Chang looked at Chen Feng and asked, "Sect leader Chen Feng, today's the first time we're meeting each other. Since our disciples are about to compete with each other, you and I should take out some prize as a betting wager, don't you think?" Upon hearing Guo Chang's words, Chen Feng smirked and agreed, "Now you're talking." With a raise of his hand, a fragment that emitted a sharp aura of a sword appeared in his hand instantly. "This is a 9th level sword concept fragment. It'll be the betting wager for my Sun Moon Sect." 931 Chapter 932, I'll bet against you myself. The 9th level sword concept fragment. The moment they heard Chen Feng's words and saw the concept fragment in his hand, many of the Five-Element Sects and Empyrean Temples people were shocked to the core. They did not think that the sect leader of Sun Moon Sect would have such a great deal of courage. With their status, a 9th level concept fragment was considered extremely valuable. After all, their status was nothing but a third-rate force in the Cloud Continent, and the strongest among them only had a comprehension at the 9th level void transformation concept. The 9th level concept fragment in their hands was either left behind by their deceased seniors or obtained by killing a martial artist who had comprehended the 9th level void transformation concept. For a third-rate force, it was not a simple matter for them to kill someone who had comprehended the 9th level void transformation concept. And, right now, Chen Feng, the sect leader of Sun Moon Sect, had taken out a 9th level sword concept fragment to be the betting wager for the battle between Lu Kai, the disciple of Sun Moon Sect, and Duan Lingtian, the disciple of Five-Element Sect. If Duan Lingtian won the battle, he would have to give the 9th level sword concept fragment to the Five-Element Sect. When Guo Chang saw Chen Feng took out a 9th level sword concept fragment as the betting wager, the sect leader of Five-Element Sect's face instantly lit up from the surprise. He could not help but exclaim out loud in astonishment, "That's so cool of you, sect leader Chen Feng. How is it, sect leader Guo, are you satisfied with the wager that I took out?" When Chen Feng saw the astonished look on Guo Chang's face, he thought that Guo Chang was taken aback by the wager. A hint of disdain could be seen in his eyes. "Stingy." Before Guo Chang could even open his mouth, a brazen voice broke the silence by calling Chen Feng, the sect leader of Sun Moon Sect, stingy. Stingy. Taking out a 9th level concept fragment as a wager was stingy. Who was this person who was so high-handed? All the eyes from the three forces immediately shifted towards the source of the voice. They saw a young man fully clad in purple. It was none other than Duan Lingtian. Did Duan Lingtian just call the sect leader of Sun Moon sect stingy? Many of the Empyrean Temple's people's eyes widened in shock. Disbelief was clearly written on their faces. In their opinion, let alone a mere five-element sect's disciple, even the sect leader of five-element sect would find the ninth-level concept fragment to be an extraordinary object. Even the sect leader of the five-element sect did not dare to call a person who put up a ninth-level concept fragment as a wager stingy. Is Duan Lingtian crazy? That's a freaking ninth-level concept fragment, for God's sake. I think he said that deliberately to make things difficult for the sect leader of Sun Moon sect. No matter what wager the sect leader of Sun Moon sect takes out, he will still call the sect leader stingy so he can use it as an excuse to withdraw from the battle. This Duan Lingtian from five-element sect is too sinister if that's true. Many of the Empyrean Temple's monk disciples whispered to one another. Although their voices were not too loud, everyone present at the scene could still hear their words. The five-element sect's disciples merely snorted at the words by the Empyrean Temple's people. They were not bothered by the words at all. They were very clear about Duan Lingtian's strength. They knew that it was absolutely impossible for him to retreat in the face of a disciple from Sun Moon sect, let alone retreating with such an indirect method. What is Duan Lingtian doing? That's a freaking ninth-level concept fragment that the sect leader of Sun Moon sect took out. How could he call him stingy? Huang Danyu, Nangong Yi, Tan Huan, Tian Zhen and the other exchanged glances and saw the same suspicion in each other's eyes. The peak masters of fire, water, and earth peaks also had the same doubtful look on their faces. Only Chi Yu, the peak master of wood peak, had a knowing smile playing on the corner of his mouth. It was as though he already knew what Duan Lingtian planned to do next. This little guy is quite greedy, huh? Guo Chong, on the other hand, was stunned into silence for a moment before being hit by a realization. He did not say anything else as he stared intensely at Duan Lingtian's back. How ridiculous! How dare you call our sect leader stingy? That's a ninth-level concept fragment, for goodness sake. I think this must be the first time you've seen one. Is that the case, you little boy? Many of the Sun Moon sect's disciples finally regained their senses and glared at Duan Lingtian as they mocked him. Well, if you're that capable, why don't you come up with a ninth-level concept fragment too? Or some other things that are even more valuable, otherwise, you're just a coward who's afraid of battling senior brother Lu Kai. You're asking him to take out a ninth-level concept fragment? I don't think he'll be able to take any out even if we kill him. In my opinion, he's afraid of senior brother Lu Kai, that's why he's trying to find an excuse to avoid a battle with senior brother Lu Kai. A group of Sun Moon sect's disciples broke into a clamor of discussion. From their words, it was obvious that they scorned Duan Lingtian, the disciple of five-element sect. In their opinions, how good could he be even if he was wildly talented and had a high comprehension when he was only 25 years old? Chen Feng raised his hand, and the group of Sun Moon sect's disciple finally quieted down. However, the gazes that were trained on Duan Lingtian were still filled with disdain that originated from the bottom of their hearts. Chen Feng narrowed his eyes as he glared at Duan Lingtian. He asked in a deep voice, "Did you just call me stingy?" "Isn't that so?" Duan Lingtian seemed oblivious to the Sun Moon sect's disciples, mocking. Now that he had heard Chen Feng's question, he answered as a matter of course. A dignified sect leader of Sun Moon sect merely took out a ninth-level concept fragment as a betting wager. Don't you think that you're stingy? Humph. A sharp gleam flashed across Chen Feng's eyes. With a snort, he replied, "This ninth-level concept fragment in my hand is just the first wager. If sect leader Guo finds this inadequate, I can add more wager on top of this." Of course it's not enough. The moment the words left Chen Feng's mouth, Duan Lingtian immediately replied, "Let alone our sect leader, even a nobody like me feels that the betting wager that you took out is not enough. You've said so yourself that you're a nobody. You think you can represent the sect leader of five-element sect?" Chen Feng snorted. "Naturally, I can't represent our sect leader, but I can bet against you myself." Duan Lingtian lifted his brow as he said this word for word. "You, betting against me on your own?" Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, Chen Feng could not suppress his bewilderment. "Ha ha ha ha, that's so funny. This little boy from the five-element sect said that he wants to bet against our sect leader on his own. Does he really think that ninth-level concept fragments are so easy to come by? At first, he said that our sect leader is stingy. Now, he said that he wants to bet against our sect leader on his own. I'd like to see for myself what exactly he'll use as a wager to bet against the sect leader. The Sun Moon sect's disciples broke into an uproar once again. Each of them was looking at Duan Lingtian with a sneer as they waited for him to make a fool of himself. This Duan Lingtian is crazy. If he can't take out anything better than the 9th level sword concept fragment, he'll only embarrass himself. He'll definitely make a fool out of himself. The monk disciples from the Empyrean Temple shook their heads while they threw pitiful glances at Duan Lingtian. Wei Kong, the abbot of Empyrean Temple, stood by the side and stared at Duan Lingtian kindly. Even when Duan Lingtian had boasted, he did not seem surprised at all. On the other hand, many of the disciples from Five Element sect were smiling. Although they did not know much about what was going on, they knew that Duan Lingtian really had no lack of 9th level concept fragments. Just a short while ago, he had just obtained 2 fragments that originated from the recently killed Renji, the sect leader of Crimson Moon sect. That's right, I'll bet against you myself. Duan Lingtian nodded his head solemnly as he stared directly into Chen Feng's eyes. Lad, do you know the value of this 9th level sword concept fragment in my hand? I can tell you that not everything can compare to the worth of this concept fragment. Chen Feng sneered as he toyed with the fragment in his hand. Well, I don't know much, but I know that the value of these 2 added together is definitely worth more than that 9th level sword concept fragment in your hand. In the face of Chen Feng's sneer, Duan Lingtian still remained calm. With a lift of his hand, 2 fragments appeared in his palm, one was blue, and the other was purple. Be it the blue or purple fragment, the colors were remarkably abstruse. It emitted an aura that made people shiver in fear. Sect leader Chen Feng, what do you think? Duan Lingtian smiled faintly as he toyed with the 2 fragments in his hand. Just at the moment when Chen Feng's gaze landed on the concept fragments in Duan Lingtian's hand, the few vice-sect leaders of Sun Moon sect standing next to Chen Feng turned pale instantly as they cried out. The 9th level wind concept fragment. The 9th level thunder concept fragment. On the Empyrean Temple's side, Wei Jing could not help but gasp. He said in a hoarse voice, it really is the 9th level wind concept fragment, and the 9th level thunder concept fragment. Earlier, he could feel cold sweat forming when he saw Duan Lingtian's licentious conduct. He thought that Duan Lingtian would make a fool of himself before the public's eyes. However, he realized at this moment that Duan Lingtian dared to do that earlier because he was completely confident in himself. He could clearly see this from the 2 9th level concept fragments that he casually took out. Those really are 2 9th level concept fragments. The Sun Moon sect's disciples, mocking faces froze up completely in an instant. One by one, their faces turned red as though they had been choked. They did not utter a single word at all for a long time. My lord, who is this Duan Lingtian? How is it possible that he just casually took out 2 9th level concept fragments? Is he the sect leader of 5 Element sect's illegitimate son or something? How exactly did the 9th level concept fragments come into his possession? Each and every one of the monk disciples from Empyrean Temple was staring at the 2 concept fragments in Duan Lingtian's palm with their red eyes. How they wished they could reach out and snatch them away from him. On the other hand, the people from 5 Element sect appeared calm and collected. This Duan Lingtian actually chose this time to take out the 2 9th level concept fragments. He wouldn't scam another 9th level concept fragment from the sect leader of Sun Moon sect, would he? Huang Daniu was stunned, but he could faintly guess his intention. There were undoubtedly many other people who had the same thought as him. For example, the peak masters of water, fire, and earth, the Nangong twins, Tan Huan, Tian Zhen and the rest. Duan Lingtian, you want to scam the sect leader of Sun Moon sect, huh? I'll make sure you won't be able to do as you wish. A light flashed across Hu Fei's eyes as a sneer appeared by the corner of his mouth. 932 Chapter 933, An Extravagant Gamble. Sect leader Chen Feng, since I'm taking out 2 pieces of 9th level concept fragments as betting wagers for the battle between your Sun Moon sect's disciple, Lu Kai and I, don't you think you should take another 9th level concept fragment out as well? Duan Lingtian stared at Chen Feng as he enunciated every single one of his words distinctly. Chen Feng's face turned somber immediately as soon as he regained his senses. It did not cross his mind that the purple-clad young man before him would be able to take out 2 9th level concept fragments. Moreover, he wanted to bet with Chen Feng on his own by using the 2 9th level concept fragments as the betting wager. Naturally, he was not a fool seeing as he was the leader of Sun Moon sect. Since the other party dared to make such a bet and was willing to take out 2 ninth-level concept fragments as the wager, he must be very confident in himself. Chen Feng was instantly caught in between a rock and a hard place. It was not difficult for him to take out another 9th-level concept fragment. However, if the purple-clad young man won the battle, not only would Sun Moon sect embarrass themselves, they would lose 2 9th-level concept fragments as well. He took out the 9th-level concept fragment earlier because he was confident his sect would definitely win the battle. He wanted to use his 9th-level concept fragment to win another 9th-level concept fragment from the hands of the sect leader of 5-element sect. However, the subsequent development of the matter was beyond his expectation. First, the purple-clad young man before him called him stingy and actually stepped forward to bet with Chen Feng independently. On top of that, he wanted to use 2 9th-level concept fragments as the betting wager. He had to admit that he was a little hesitant when he saw the confident look on the other party's face. Although he refused to believe that a young man at such a young age could defeat Lu Kai, his Sun Moon sect's disciple who was at the 9th-level void interpretation stage, he immediately became very cautious the moment he recalled that the matter involved 2 9th-level concept fragments. What now, sect leader Chen Feng, don't tell me you dare not bet. Duan Lingtian saw through Chen Feng's thoughts when he saw him hesitating. Duan Lingtian deliberately raised his voice so that everyone could hear him clearly as he burst into a fit of laughter. When he reached the end of his sentence, a contemptuous smirk could be seen playing on the corner of his mouth. Dare not bet. Chen Feng became enraged the moment he heard Duan Lingtian's words and noticed the gazes around him. However, it seemed like his rage was immediately put out by a splash cold water as he turned calm and collected without any warning. He knew that the other party was using the provocation tactic to goad him into accepting the bet. At this moment, a voice transmission suddenly resounded in his ears from afar. Sect leader Chen Feng, you mustn't agree to this bet with Duan Lingtian. Don't be fooled by his appearance. He's actually a martial artist at the first-level void transformation stage. Apart from comprehending a type of void transformation concept, he has even comprehended 3 other 9th-level interpretation concepts. Duan Lingtian is trying to provoke you so that you'll agree to the bet. You must not be fooled by him. Otherwise, your Sun Moon sect will definitely lose 2 9th-level concept fragments. The voice transmission ended without any warning when it reached this point. The instant Chen Feng heard the voice transmission, his face turned ashen immediately. The first-level voice transformation. Had he comprehended a void transformation concept? Moreover, he had also comprehended 3 9th-level void interpretation concepts. Chen Feng inhaled deeply as he sized up the purple-clad young man while he continuously asked himself in his heart, is this Duan Lingtian really that capable? He could not believe this. In his opinion, it was something that was almost impossible. It was necessary for a first-level void transformation martial artist to comprehend the void transformation concept. However, if he had comprehended another 9th-level void interpretation concept, he could be considered as a monster in comprehending concepts. The voice transmission had actually said that Duan Lingtian was a first-level void transformation martial artist who had not only comprehended the void transformation concept but 3 other void interpretation concepts as well. Absurd. It was absolutely absurd. Chen Feng shook his head. He immediately decided that the other party was trying to deceive him. Moreover, that voice transmission actually came from the group of 5-element sects people. Unfortunately, the voice transmission came too abruptly. Due to this reason, he could not identify the owner of the voice transmission among the 5-element sect's disciples. However, there was one thing that he was completely sure of. He was certain the other party was trying to deceive him. He could easily guess why the other party was trying to deceive him. The other party simply did not want him to accept the bet with Duan Lingtian and wanted him, the Sun Moon sect, to bend in the face of 5-element sect. Moreover, the other party also wanted him to embarrass himself in front of the Empyrean Temple. Although it seemed like the other party was trying to help him retain his 2 9th-level concept fragments by doing this, the reason the other party did this was to help Duan Lingtian and the 5-element sect if one was to think about it deeply. This was because if he rejected the challenge now, his disciple would lose the chance to defeat Duan Lingtian before a big crowd of people. Furthermore, 5-element sect would win this hands down without a fight, making it easy for them to suppress Sun Moon sect. Duan Lingtian, I must admit that you're indeed smart. As Chen Feng looked at Duan Lingtian, he told him through voice transmission, you actually know how to make concessions for the sake of advancing, huh? You asked someone to exaggerate your strength in front of me so that the Sun Moon sect and I would withdraw in the face of difficulties, thus letting you and the Five Elements sect win without a fight. If it was someone from the Empyrean Temple who had warned me using the voice transmission, I might have fallen for it. However, you actually let your Five Elements sect warn me through voice transmission. How foolish is that? Chen Feng's voice transmission was filled with disdain. Duan Lingtian was stunned for a moment when he heard Chen Feng's voice transmission. He asked somebody from Five Elements sect to exaggerate his strength in front of Chen Feng through voice transmission. Initially, Duan Lingtian was somewhat perplexed. He could not suppress his curiosity as he glanced around at the Five Elements sect's people. Soon enough, he finally found some telltale signs. The moment he looked at Hu Fei, he noticed that Hu Fei's gaze seemed to be avoiding him deliberately. The fact that he did not dare to look at him directly was completely out of his character. Hu Fei. A cold gleam flashed across his eyes as the flame of fury in his heart rose up immediately. He was certain that Hu Fei was the person that sent the voice transmission to Chen Feng. However, it seemed like Chen Feng did not believe Hu Fei at all. This made Duan Lingtian sigh in relief. After Duan Lingtian heaved a sigh of relief, the killing intent in the depth of Duan Lingtian's eyes burned even brighter. That killing intent was targeted at none other than Hu Fei. It was just as he had previously thought. He would not have a day of peace as long as Hu Fei was alive. How pitiful. What a pity. Originally, I was a little hesitant when I saw you confidently taking out 2 9th-level transformation concepts to bet with me. At that time, I even thought of rejecting that betting wager of yours in order to retain my 9th-level concept fragments even if it means that the Sun Moon sect and I would make a fool out of ourselves. Chen Feng's voice transmission that was filled with complacency continued on in Duan Lingtian's ears. Unfortunately, you asked somebody from Five Elements sect to exaggerate your strength to me through voice transmission. I can still accept mild exaggeration, but I can't believe that he would actually exaggerate to the point that it became ridiculous. For this reason, the person who will be disgraced today will neither be Sun Moon sect nor I. Instead, it'll be Five Elements sect and you, Duan Lingtian. Chen Feng's voice transmission ended abruptly. Duan Lingtian was stunned into silence. Did Hu Fei just inadvertently help him? If Hu Fei knew that it would turn out this way, he would most likely be so enraged that he would spit out 3 liters of blood at least. However, Duan Lingtian's killing intent towards Hu Fei did not diminish at all just because of this. In his heart, Hu Fei was already a dead man. As long as he had the opportunity, he would definitely make sure Hu Fei died in his hands. Humph. Upon hearing Chen Feng's voice transmission, Duan Lingtian snorted. He deliberately darkened his expression a little. When Chen Feng saw Duan Lingtian's face, a mocking smile appeared on his face instantly. Another piece of concept fragment appeared in his palm with just a lift of his hand. Under the watchful eyes of the others, Chen Feng announced loudly, Duan Lingtian, since you wanted to go big, let me accompany you in going big as well. This is a 9th-level saber concept fragment. Coupled with the 9th-level sword concept fragment in my hand, these two will become the Sun Moon sect's betting wager. Chen Feng did not wait for Duan Lingtian to respond. Instead, he looked at Wei Kong, the abbot of the Empyrean Temple. Wei Kong, you bald donkey. Although I've never dealt with you before, I've heard that you're a decent man. Today, I would like to invite you to become the witness for the bet between Duan Lingtian, this disciple of Five Elements sect, and I. As for the betting wagers, I think you should be the one to safekeep them as well. As he finished his sentence, Chen Feng lifted his hand and tossed the 2 9th-level concept fragments to Wei Kong. After Wei Kong caught the 2 9th-piece concept fragments, he put his 10 fingers together and said, Amitabha, since sect leader Chen believes in me, I'll do as you wish. Duan Lingtian, don't you think you should also pass your betting wagers to Wei Kong, that bald donkey, for safekeeping? A smirk could be seen playing by the corner of Chen Feng's mouth as he looked at Duan Lingtian. He had chosen to pass the fragments for safekeeping because he was worried Duan Lingtian would regret his decision later. If the situation developed until that point, although Duan Lingtian and the Five Elements sect would make a fool out of themselves, his Sun Moon sect would not be able to get their hands on the 2 concept fragments in Duan Lingtian's hands. The reason he did that was to make it difficult for Duan Lingtian to back down from his decision. Naturally, Duan Lingtian could still refuse if he wanted to, but the price he would have to pay for his refusal would be extremely high. It would be far higher than the value of the 2 9th-level concept fragments. If Duan Lingtian really did refuse, it would be difficult not only for him but for the entire five-element sect to lift their heads up in the northern desert in the future. Good call, sect leader Chen Feng. Naturally, Duan Lingtian knew what Chen Feng was thinking. After he deliberately showed Chen Feng an expression like he was deep in thoughts, he casually threw the two ninth-level concept fragments in his hand to Wei Kong. Abbot Wei Kong, thank you. After he took the two ninth-level concept fragments, Wei Kong said with his 10 fingers interlaced, Amitabha, you're most welcome, little benefactor Duan. When Chen Feng saw Duan Lingtian pass the two ninth-level concept fragments to Wei Kong without any hesitation, he could not help but furrowed his brows. However, he quickly unfurrowed his brows again. In his opinion, Duan Lingtian was just putting on air to appear impressive. No matter what, he would never believe that a little boy like Duan Lingtian would be able to defeat Lu Kai, who ranked among the top 3 among the younger generation of Sun Moon sect. Whoosh! At this time, Duan Lingtian had an aloof expression on his face as he returned to stand before Lu Kai. Little benefactor Duan, little benefactor Lu. Although your battle involves the ownership of two ninth-level concept fragments, I hope that the both of you will show restraint, Wei Kong advised with his fingers interlaced as he looked at Duan Lingtian and Lu Kai. 933 Chapter 934, It's because he's my big brother Duan. I have no opinion, Duan Lingtian shrugged indifferently. The purpose of him joining the battle was to win the two ninth-level concept fragments. It really did not matter to him if he killed his opponent or not. Naturally, the most important factor was Lu Kai, the Sun Moon sect's disciple who was standing before him, had yet to do anything that elicited his killing intent. Anyone who provokes our Sun Moon sect has to die. Lu Kai's voice was blood-curdling and shrill. It was obvious from his words that he had the intention of killing Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes. A sneer crept up on the corner of his mouth. Earlier, he was still wondering if he should spare Lu Kai's life or not. However, the sentence that Lu Kai uttered had completely destroyed his original plan. Everyone must be responsible for the words they said. Duan Lingtian and Lu Kai stood across each other in a stalemate. They immediately attracted everyone's attention. It's amazing that Duan Lingtian was able to take out two ninth-level concept fragments. However, what's more shocking is the fact that he dares to bet against the sect leader of Sun Moon sect. Don't tell me he really thinks he can beat the Sun Moon sect's disciple. That Sun Moon sect's disciple is personally named by the sect leader of Sun Moon sect, so his strength is certainly simple. This Duan Lingtian is most likely going for wool, but he'll most likely end up coming home shorn. Many of the monk disciples from the Empyrean Temple were engaged in discussion with each other. It was apparent that they had no faith in Duan Lingtian at all. Naturally, if one were to get into the whys and wherefores of it, it all boiled down to the fact that Duan Lingtian was too young, so young that it was bordering on ridiculous. Whoosh! All of a sudden, the black clothes on Lu Kai, the Sun Moon sect's disciple who was locked in a stalemate with Duan Lingtian, billowed without warning. The origin energy on his body rose and continued to merge with a wave of sharp aura. In just a blink of an eye, Lu Kai's tyrannical aura transformed into a gigantic saber, and it emitted a wave of aura that seemed like it was able to cut everything open. The heaven and earth energy on the sky world, and the heaven and earth phenomenon immediately solidified into form. First, 120 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons appeared, and it was closely followed by another 100 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons. The 9th level Void Interpretation. 9th level Intermediate Saber Concept Fragment. Lu Kai's strength came as a shock to many Empyrean Temple's disciples. It further convinced them that Duan Lingtian would not be able to defeat Lu Kai. Duan Lingtian, I hope that you won't disappoint me. Zanbei muttered to himself as he stared at Duan Lingtian's silhouette. A spirit saber that was as thin as a cicada's wing appeared in Lu Kai's hand. At the moment he was about to launch his attack, it seemed like he had noticed something. He shook his head as he looked in the distance. At this time, everybody, including Duan Lingtian, also looked into the distance. As it turned out, there was a group of people heading in their direction. In just a flash, they arrived at the spot where Duan Lingtian and the others stood. Big Brother Duan, a soft and sweet voice that was filled with joy rang out from the group of people. Under the watchful eyes of the others, a flash of fiery fairy-like figure immediately soared upwards and flew all the way to the purple-clad figure with a speed that was as fast as lightning. When Duan Lingtian heard the familiar voice, he felt his heart tightened immediately. In the next moment, he noticed that the streak of the fiery red figure had already arrived in front of him before he could even respond. She stood across him as they faced each other. The person standing across Duan Lingtian was a girl so beautiful that her beauty could topple a city. A smile that could infatuate all mortals was spread widely on her face. For a moment, the surroundings seemed dull in comparison. Tian Wu. Duan Lingtian smiled faintly when he saw the red-clad girl before him. The person who came was none other than Feng Tian Wu. Feng Wu Tian, who became excited after she saw the person who had been appearing in her dreams in flesh and blood, calmed herself down a little. After taking a deep breath, she finally asked gently, "Big brother Duan, why are you here?" It did not cross her mind that she would be able to meet her big brother Duan here. Was big brother Duan not taken away by a martial monarch powerhouse? Duan Lingtian, brother Lingtian. At this moment, two figures followed suit behind Feng Tian Wu and appeared in front of Duan Lingtian. Astonishment could clearly be seen on their faces. It was apparent that they did not expect to see Duan Lingtian here. Su Li, big brother Zhang, Duan Lingtian greeted the two of them as he smiled. The two people who appeared in front of Duan Lingtian were none other than Su Li and Zhang Shouyang. Su Li could not contain his curiosity as he asked, "Duan Lingtian, where have you been all these while? Why are you here all of a sudden?" Although Zhang Shouyang did not say a word, his gaze that was filled with puzzlement indicated that he was curious about this as well. The entire story is a little too hard to explain with just a few words. I'll tell all of you more about it when we have time. As for why I'm here, well, the reason is the same as yours. Duan Lingtian shook his head before he continued, "However, the one thing that's different is you're representing Blade Sect while I represent Five Element Sect." Five Element Sect. After Su Li heard Duan Lingtian's words, he could not suppress his surprise. The Five Element Sect, that's also one of the three major forces in the eastern district of the northern desert. Yes. Duan Lingtian smiled and nodded. Big brother Duan, why did you suddenly join the Five Element Sect? A look of bafflement crept up on Feng Tian Wu's pretty face. Before Duan Lingtian could reply, a flash of light shone in the eyes of a middle-aged man as his gaze landed on Duan Lingtian. He was among the four men leading the group that had just arrived. Duan Lingtian, the middle-aged man greeted Duan Lingtian. The moment he heard the voice, Duan Lingtian shifted his attention towards the middle-aged man. His eyes lit up instantly as he quickly greeted with surprise, "Senior." This middle-aged man was none other than the vice-sect leader of the Sword Sect from Blade Sect. He was also Su Li's master, Sword 13. He owed Sword 13 a debt of gratitude, and he had always kept this in mind. "Did you just say that you came here on behalf of the Five Element Sect?" Sword 13 asked with a slight frown. "Yes." Duan Lingtian nodded his head before he quickly apologized, "Senior, I'm very sorry. Five Element Sect has been very kind to me, I'll work on their behalf of this time when I enter the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. I really can't represent Blade Sect this time." When the people from Five Element Sect saw so many people from the group of newcomers were familiar with Duan Lingtian, they were taken aback for a moment. At this moment, when they heard the exchange between Duan Lingtian and Sword 13, they were once again stunned. Was Duan Lingtian supposed to represent Blade Sect in entering the Martial Emperor's secret treasure previously? Although they did not know what happened, they could not help but rejoice when they heard Duan Lingtian's words. In their opinions, Duan Lingtian was a massive killing weapon. Having him in Five Element Sect would definitely gain them the greatest benefits when they were in the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. Before Sword 13 had time to even open his mouth, a cold snort could be heard at once. Humph! A green figure immediately flew out from the group of Blade Sect's people. It was obvious the green-clad young man was one of the Blade Sect's 20 young disciples. After that green-clad young man came out, he immediately looked at Duan Lingtian and asked in a deep voice, "So, you're Duan Lingtian? Who are you?" Zhou Weiqing frowned instantly when he was faced with the unfriendly green-clad young man. After the green-clad young man swept a contemptuous glance at Duan Lingtian, he asked with his deep voice again, "You don't have to know who I am. You only need to answer me. Did you promise Senior Uncle Sword that you'll enter the Sword Sect of Blade Sect?" "Yes, but," Duan Lingtian nodded his head. Just as he was about to explain the situation, he was immediately interrupted by that green-clad young man again, "That's good enough. In other words, you're supposed to be a disciple of the Sword Sect of Blade Sect, but you actually jumped ship to the Five Element Sect. Although you're just a soon-to-be disciple of Sword Sect, a soon-to-be disciple who jumped ship to another sect would be regarded as a traitor as well according to our Blade Sect's rules. Today, I, Lian Shang, will represent the sect's law enforcement elders to enforce the rule and take the traitor out. The green-clad young man, Lian Shang, said all of that very quickly. Before the crowd even had time to make head or tail of the situation, he had already transformed into a flash of green light and charged towards Duan Lingtian. Whoosh! A streak of swift sword's ray accompanied his attack on Duan Lingtian. In just a blink of an eye, the sword's ray had already appeared before Duan Lingtian's eyes. What an appalling speed the sword's ray possessed! Whoosh! In the meantime, over 270 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons appeared on top of Lian Shang's head. In other words, the sword that he unleashed at Duan Lingtian had the strength of over 270 ancient horned dragons. 8th level Void Interpretation, 8th level Intermediate Sword Concept. Grade 3 Spirit Sword. In the eyes of most of the people present at the scene, the green-clad young man possessed a speed that was shockingly fast. However, in Duan Lingtian's eyes, that speed was pitifully slow. When Duan Lingtian saw the Grade 3 Spirit Sword in the hands of the green-clad young man was barely a foot away from his eyes, he was already prepared to reach a hand out to catch the sword. It was not a difficult task for him to take on the sword with his bare hands after all. However, he could hear a hissing noise that vanished as soon as it appeared without any warning just as he was about to extend his hand. Smack! At this moment, a crisp and clear sound entered Duan Lingtian's ears. Duan Lingtian immediately noticed that the sword that was in close proximity with his eyes had disappeared without a trace. More precisely, it had already flown far away. An arm that had been severed flew along with it. The severed arm was very eye-catching with the fresh blood pouring out from the open wound. The blood spilled from the sky, and it formed a patch that was similar to blossoming red rose. Ah! Meanwhile, a shrill scream broke the silence in the air. It was none other than Lian Shang who stood not far away from Duan Lingtian. Cries of pain could be heard from him as he pressed on the wound on his shoulder to staunch the continuously flowing blood. Who was that? When he finally caught his breath, he immediately glared at the person who had just attacked him. However, the moment he saw the red spirit snake-like long whip in the hand of the red-clad young woman who was just standing still, his face blanched immediately. J. Junior's sister F. Feng. He has betrayed our sect, so he should atone for it with his death. Why did you help him? The person who crippled Lian Shang was none other than Feng Tianwu. She was also the first person who came to her senses and immediately stopped Lian Shang in time. The whip swept out and instantly wrapped around Lian Shang's arm that was holding onto the sword. In the next moment, she forcibly tore the arm off Lian Shang's shoulder and flung it away. Her entire movement was as smooth as water. It's because he's my big brother Duan. Feng Tianwu's answer was very simple and straightforward. 934 Chapter 935, Battle. It's because he's my big brother Duan. Just a short sentence from Feng Tianwu was enough to make many of the young men from all the different forces look at Duan Lingtian with jealousy. How they itched to be the person to take Duan Lingtian's place instead. At this moment, anyone who was not blind could see Feng Tianwu's affection for Duan Lingtian. This Duan Lingtian has quite a luck with women, Huang Daniu said with a look of envy on his face. When he first saw such an exquisite beauty like Feng Tianwu, he could not help but become immediately infatuated. With a face that was filled with jealousy and hate, Lian Shang gnashed his teeth as he hissed at Feng Tianwu, J. Junior's sister Feng, why you'll regret this. Then, he turned and flew away to give chase to the severed arm that she had torn off and flung away. If he can find his arm and reattach it in time, there's still a possibility of recovery. When the Blade Sect's disciple launched his attack, the heaven and earth energy world and a total of 120 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons solidified. Although he's strong, he still had his arm severed by this fairy-like female disciple from Blade Sect. This Blade Sect's disciple appears to be only in her early 20s, it's terribly shocking that she possesses such a horrifying strength at such a young age. She's indeed one of God's favorite. Not only does she has looks that could topple a country and infatuate all mortal beings, she even has such remarkable talents and comprehension that are more than enough to incite people's jealousy. It did not matter if they were the disciples from Five Element Sect, Empyrean Temple or Sun Moon Sect, all of them could not help but whisper among each other. The shock that Feng Tianwu gave them was too earth-shattering. Although Feng Tianwu's attack was very quick, it was so fast that she did not even mobilize her heaven and earth energy to solidify the heaven and earth phenomenon. They could clearly see that Feng Tianwu's strength was a lot more powerful than the blade sect's disciple whose arm she severed. Tianwu girl, you've gone too far this time. One of the two old men who was leading blade sect, the skinny one, looked at Feng Tianwu with a slight hint of censure. As the saying went, anyone who touches the forbidden dragon's lamella will die. In her world, Duan Lingtian was her lamella. Today, she did not kill Lian Shang because her father, Feng Wudao, was a sword sect's elder in blade sect. She did not want to put her father in a difficult situation. The sect leader of blade sect. Although Duan Lingtian did not know whether this man was the sect leader of saber or sword sect, he must admit that his impression of him was not good. What did he mean by, gone too far? That blade sect's disciple, Lian Shang, wanted to kill him the moment he appeared. The sword in his hand was within reach from his eyes, and it could have killed him. If it had not been for Tianwu who reacted in time, that green-clad young man would already be a dead body by now if it was up to Duan Lingtian. Lian Shang only had one of his arms severed, and that old man actually condemned Tianwu for overdoing it. The old man quickly shifted his gaze from Feng Tianwu to Duan Lingtian. His tone was extremely casual and his voice was aloof as he asked, "You're Duan Lingtian? The soon-to-be disciple of my sword sect?" Duan Lingtian remained calm. He looked directly into the old man's eyes and announced in an indifferent manner, "From now on, I, Duan Lingtian, have nothing to do at all with blade sect." The moment he heard the old man condemning Feng Tianwu earlier, he no longer had any interest in joining blade sect. Duan Lingtian. Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, Sword 13 immediately became aghast. It did not cross his mind that Duan Lingtian would speak to the sect leader of sword sect from blade sect in such a manner. Moreover, the first thing that came out of his mouth was to actually cut off all ties with blade sect. Oh, after the old man came to his senses, his face darkened immediately. He asked in a deep voice, "Do you really think that blade sect is somewhere you can easily enter and leave as you please?" "To me, yes," Duan Lingtian replied without any hesitation. "In the beginning, I only promised Senior that I'll join blade sect because of my gratitude to him. As of now, I have zero interest in joining blade sect." When Duan Lingtian reached this point in his sentence, he became too lazy to continue paying attention to the old man. Instead, he looked at Sword 13. "Senior, I'll definitely pay my debt of gratitude to you one day. However, it's really impossible for me to join blade sect." The old man's attitude earlier was like a splash of cold water on Duan Lingtian's heart. Although there might be some other reason for his behavior, Lian Shang's identity and background might not be ordinary, those excuse was not enough for him. When Sword 13 saw the determination on Duan Lingtian's face, he knew that the situation had been irreversibly damaged. For a moment, he did not know what to say, and he could only smile wryly. "All right, fine. Today, for the sake of Tianwu this little girl, I'll not get into a dispute with you for now." The old man became blue in the face from the rage caused by Duan Lingtian. When he finished his sentence, he took a deep breath before he continued again, "Since you're unwilling to enter our blade sect will not force you as well. From today onwards, you're no longer the soon-to-be disciple of our blade sect. We have many strong young powerhouses in our sect. There's no difference whether you're in or not." As the old man reached the end of his sentence, he announced it with flagging interest. It was obvious that he thought very little of Duan Lingtian. "I couldn't ask for anything better." Duan Lingtian nodded his head before he turned toward Lu Kai, the Sun Moon sect's disciple who was waiting behind him. He motioned to him and said in a deep voice, "Let's begin." He had not forgotten about the bet that he had made with Chen Feng, the sect leader of Sun Moon sect. This matter concerned 2 9th-level concept fragments, so he would definitely remember it. "Big brother Duan, you're..." Feng Tianwu swept a glance at Lu Kai. Although Lu Kai had already retracted his origin energy and concept, she saw his strength when she first arrived. Without any spirit weapon, he managed to mobilize his heaven and earth energy and solidified 220 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons. Due to this reason, Feng Tianwu could see that Lu Kai was a 9th-level void interpretation martial artist who had comprehended the 9th-level void interpretation concept. "It's nothing. I have a battle in bet with him. You only need to watch from the side." Duan Lingtian shook his head and flashed Feng Tianwu a smile as he gave her a reassuring look. Feng Tianwu retreated obediently upon hearing his words. Duan Lingtian, be careful. At this time, Su Li and Zhang Shouyang had also retreated and watched Duan Lingtian standing in a confrontation manner across the black-clad young man. That young man gave them a sense of danger. As Duan Lingtian and Lu Kai were locked in a stalemate with each other again, the origin energy and the saber concept reappeared on Lu Kai again as well. At the same time, the monk disciples from the Empyrean Temple started to bury their heads together in heated discussions again. From the mouth of the Empyrean Temple monk disciples, Feng Tianwu, Su Li, Zhang Shouyang and the rest of Blade Sect's people quickly learned the ins and outs of the matter. A stunned expression could be seen on everyone's faces. The betting wager for this battle from both sides are 2 9th-level concept fragments. That Sun Moon Sect's disciple, Lu Kai, is a 9th-level void interpretation martial artist who has comprehended the 9th-level intermediate sword concept. Each and every one of the people from Blade Sect was discussing this among themselves as well. There was a hint of surprise on their faces, and they could not help but feel anticipative. They were all eager to watch Duan Lingtian and Lu Kai's battle. Naturally, the majority of them felt that the odds of Lu Kai winning the battle were higher. Swish! At this moment, a figure appeared from the distance. It was none other than Lian Shang, who went to retrieve his arm earlier. The severed arm had already been reattached to his body, but Lian Shang's face was still extremely pale. It was so pale that he looked no different from a dead man. After he came back, he turned to look at Feng Tianwu. The depth of his eyes was extremely cold. Lian Shang, let us move on from the incident when Tianwu severed your arm earlier. The skinny old man, who was also the sect leader of Sword Sect, swept a glance at Lian Shang faintly. His tone was cold and did not contain any emotions at all. Sect leader, upon hearing the old man's words, horror dawned on Lian Shang's face immediately. Just as he was about to refute, he was cut off by that old man. Didn't you hear me clearly? Or could it be that you actually want me to repeat my words again? When the old man reached the end of his sentence, his voice was as cold as a thaw hole. It was so cold that Lian Shang could not help but shiver as he glared at Feng Tianwu unwillingly. However, he eventually had to dismiss the thoughts of revenge from his mind. He was very clear that he could no longer take vengeance at Feng Tianwu unless he did not want to stay in Blade Sect anymore, or if this old man passed away. Otherwise, he would be a dead man if the old man found out. Lian Shang took a deep breath as he shifted his gaze away and started to search for Duan Lingtian's silhouette. Very soon, he noticed that Duan Lingtian was locked in a stalemate with a black-clad young man. Moreover, that black-clad young man demonstrated a strength that was far more powerful than himself, the 9th-level void interpretation and a comprehension at the 9th-level void interpretation concept. What's going on? Lian Shang was extremely puzzled. Why would Duan Lingtian go up against this young powerhouse? After he had learned of the reason from the bystanders, he could not help but secretly smirk. So it's like this, huh? This Duan Lingtian is seeking for his own death. Does he really think that he can win against a 9th-level void interpretation martial artist who has comprehended the 9th-level void interpretation concept? How lucky that you did not by my hands. Lian Shang's cold gaze was trained on Duan Lingtian as a sneer crept up on the corner of his mouth. However, the sneer completely froze in place in the next moment. Dear Lord, what did he just witness? In the distance, Lu Kai, the Sun Moon Sect's disciple, finally launched his attack. The spirit saber that was as thin as a cicada's wing in his hand trembled as all of his energy from his body rushed into the spirit saber, and he pounced at Duan Lingtian. More than 310 silhouettes of ancient horned dragons in the sky charged and leapt at Duan Lingtian with their teeth and claws bared. Screech! The saber ray that was as thin as a cicada's wings pointed forward, and the airflow in the air was immediately sliced into two. It caused a series of screeching sound. As the screeching sound turned louder, it also became completely ear-piercing. The slice that contained the strength of over 310 ancient horned dragons charged at Duan Lingtian like a shadow that followed its form. It looked like it was about to slice and rip Duan Lingtian into two. Faced with such a deadly and fierce slice from the sword, Duan Lingtian's eyes shone with indifference and fearlessness. Without any warning, he took a step forward. Under the watchful eyes of the others, Duan Lingtian finally made his move. His right palm formed a fist as his arm suddenly stretched backward. His wide back became as taut as a pulled bow. All of a sudden, whoosh, followed by a quiver on Duan Lingtian's strong back, his fist shot out like a cannonball and charged forward to intercept the swift saber ray. 935 When everyone saw Duan Lingtian's empty-handed fist charging out to greet the Grade 2 spirit saber that was as thin as cicada's wing in Lu Kai, the Sun Moon sect disciples' hand, almost everyone, apart from the 5 element sect's people, had shivers running down their spines. However, this did not last for too long. Whoosh! A wave of tyrannical origin energy blasted out of Duan Lingtian's fist that shot out like a cannonball. The instant the origin energy appeared, an earth-shattering transformation suddenly took place. Cloudy white origin energy transformed into a wave of vast majestic khaki energy. Around the khaki energy, there were streaks of thunderbolts that were as robust as purple electrical snakes that spread all over the place. Apart from that, a sharp aura was emitting from it as well. Moreover, there were also gusts of solidified wind kai that were twining around his fists like a shadow. Naturally, all of these changes could only be seen by the senior officials from each of the major sects who possessed astonishing eyesights. As for the young disciples from each of the major forces, they could no longer see what was happening to Duan Lingtian's fist the moment he punched out his fist. All that they could see was the rapid surging of the airflow in the air as it compressed against each other and exploded, setting off a series of ear-piercing explosions that entered their ears like thunder. Boom, 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 comma. The sound of explosion became louder as it went on. It thumped on the eardrums of the young disciples from every major force with lower cultivation bases as their faces blanched. The eardrums of some of the young disciples whose cultivation base was not good were blasted open. A gush of blood leaked out from their ears. Wham! All of a sudden, a loud noise reverberated in the sky. Everyone on the scene narrowed their eyes immediately. When the energy contained in Duan Lingtian's fist went forward to welcome the Grade 2 spirit saber in Lu Kai, the Sun Moon sect's disciple's hand, it shook and sent the Grade 2 spirit saber flying backward as easily as breaking a dry branch. The energy then shrouded Lu Kai's body. In that instance, Lu Kai's body exploded before turning into flesh and blood that scattered in the sky. It left no complete piece behind. There could not be a more horrifying way for him to die. Swish! After Duan Lingtian completely crushed and blew up Lu Kai in just one blow, he retracted the origin energy in his hands and his 4 concepts. The heaven and earth energy that was whirling above his head subsequently dissipated as well. Because his attack had happened in a blink of an eye, the heaven and earth phenomenon had already dispersed before it could even solidify into form. Duan Lingtian hovered in midair. Not far ahead of him was a rain of blood and flesh that covered the entire sky. It was like a blooming firework that celebrated his final victory in this battle bet. Fireworks filled the sky, it looked extremely beautiful, eye-catching and dazzling. The purple robe on Duan Lingtian fluttered along with the wind. The sight of him hovering there made him appear majestic in the eyes of the spectators. Gasp, 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 comma, a series of gasping sound resonated in the air. As one subsided, another rose again in succession. This Duan Lingtian is so powerful. Don't you think his strength is too horrifying? Just a blow and he managed to blow up that Sun Moon sect's disciple whose comprehension was at the 9th level void interpretation concept. Look at his age. He's basically a monster. Comma. It did not matter if it was a disciple from the Empyrean Temple, Sun Moon sect, or Blade sect, all of them could not help but whisper to each other. In their exchange, the moment they brought up the name, Duan Lingtian, a hint of dread could be heard in their voice. It was the kind of dread that originated from the bottom of their hearts. Big Brother Duan. Feng Tianwu's eyes lit up immediately. A smile that could infatuate all mortal beings appeared on her delicate face. She stood there with her graceful body and her smile that was as beautiful as a flower, it was as though she was a magnificent painting. Although Feng Tianwu had always had complete faith in Duan Lingtian, the moment she saw the tremendous power Duan Lingtian demonstrated and how he killed his opponent with just one blow, she still felt very happy for him. Duan Lingtian's power has become so powerful now. Su Li's eyes narrowed instantly, amazement was written all over his face. Initially, I thought our gap would narrow when I see him next, but who would have ever thought that he's already so far ahead? The way Duan Lingtian had killed a 9th level void interpretation martial artist who had comprehended the 9th level void interpretation concept with just one blow had shaken him to the core. Zhang Shouyang's eyes were narrowed as well. Although he did not say anything, the current expression he was wearing was enough to give a hint to the bewilderment he felt in his heart. After all, it was safe to say that he had been watching Duan Lingtian grow day by day up to today. The young man in the past who needed his help to survive at the Eternal Jade restaurant in the ancient city of Everlast had unwittingly grown to a stage where he had to look up to him now. Every dog has its day. Brother Ling Tian, now that I think back on how we first met, it's indeed true that great changes do come with time, Zhang Shouyang thought to himself. In Blade Sect, other than Feng Tianwu, Su Li and Zhang Shouyang who were struck dumb with amazement, Blade 13 and the other 3 Blade Sect's senior officials could not help but felt bewildered as well. Just a few months and Duan Ling Tian's strength has actually risen to such a level. What sorcery is this? Blade 13 marveled. As expected from a variant. Saber 5 who stood nearby nodded approvingly. Variant. Saber 5's words instantly made the 2 old men standing by the side froze for a moment. The sturdy old man looked at him and asked in a deep voice, Saber 5, did you just say that Duan Ling Tian is a variant? Yes, Saber 5 nodded. He's a variant who can cast innate ability. A variant who can cast innate ability. The sturdy old man, who was also the sect leader of Saber Sect in Blade Sect, gasped. The skinny old man standing by his side, who was the sect leader of Sword Sect, could not help but shiver for a moment before he froze for a few seconds. At this moment, all he could feel was the burning heat on his face. It was as though the words that he told Duan Ling Tian earlier was replaying in his ears. We have many strong and young powerhouses in our sect. There won't be any difference whether you're in or not. He really wanted to give himself a good slap at this moment. He had said that earlier because he did not know Duan Ling Tian's strength was actually this appalling, let alone the fact that Duan Ling Tian was actually a one-of-a-kind variant. Why didn't the both of you say so earlier? The sect leader of Sword Sect glared at Sword 13 and Blade 5, a hint of fury could be heard in his voice. Had he known earlier that Duan Ling Tian's strength was so formidable, and that he was actually a variant, he would never have treated Duan Ling Tian that way earlier. A single slip could cause a lasting sorrow. This was exactly what the sect leader of Sword Sect was feeling right now. Previously, Senior Brother Sword and I thought that Duan Ling Tian had been brought away by that martial emperor powerhouse, so we didn't mention much about him. Sword 13 smiled wryly. Saber 5 nodded. Fine, since things have become like this, there's nothing much we can do right now. It's us, Blade Sect, that has no fate with him, we can't blame it on anything else, the sect leader of Blade Sect said while shaking his head. He could guess what the sect leader of Sword Sect was thinking. How's this possible? Lian Shang's eyes were filled with disbelief as he watched the purple figure hovering in the distant sky. He shook his head continuously, he refused to believe that this was real. I heard from Su Li that he's only around 28 years old. A 28 years old who can kill a 9th level void interpretation martial artist who had comprehended the 9th level void interpretation concept with just a blow. Lian Shang's heart rate gradually accelerated, and he could not calm down for a long time. With his strength, if he had launched an attack on me a step earlier than junior sister Feng when I attacked him, wouldn't I end up dead instead? The moment Lian Shang thought of this, his forehead immediately became clammy from cold sweat. He no longer dared to regard Duan Ling Tian as an enemy. He was terrified now. Duan Ling Tian's horrifying strength had completely destroyed the hatred he had accumulated in his heart toward Duan Ling Tian. Senior Brother Ling Tian is really amazing. Exactly. Just a blow and he managed to kill the 9th level void interpretation Crimson Moon Sect's disciple who had comprehended 9th level void interpretation concept. Looking at the current younger generations in the 5-element sect, only Senior Brother Duan can do that. Didn't the senior official from Blade Sect say that there are many strong and young powerhouses in their sect and that there won't be any difference whether Duan Ling Tian is in or not? What a joke. Other than that red-clad young girl who's infatuated with Senior Brother Ling Tian, who else in Blade Sect can actually be compared to Senior Brother Ling Tian? The 5-element sect's disciples discussed with each other. Many of them looked mockingly at the sect leader of Sword Sect from Blade Sect. It was as though they were laughing at how ignorant he was. The group of 5-element sect's high officials, apart from Guo Chong and Qi Yu, had a bright smile on their faces. Even Cha Bai, the peak master of Fire Peak who had some dispute with Duan Ling Tian in the past, seemed to also have forgotten about the differences between himself and Duan Ling Tian. He also had a sincere smile on his face. Humph, how dare the Chen Feng doubt me? Standing by the side, Hu Fei cast a glance from afar at Chen Feng, the sect leader of Sun Moon Sect. A smirk could be seen playing at the corner of his mouth. In his opinion, it was entirely Chen Feng's own fault for losing to Duan Ling Tian this time. How is this possible? At this moment, Chen Feng was extremely horrified and appalled. It did not cross his mind that a five-element sect's disciple who looked only around 25 years old would actually be this horrifying. Just a blow and he managed to kill Lu Kai, who ranked third among the younger generation in Sun Moon sect. Moreover, it was under the circumstance where Lu Kai had activated his grade 2 spirit saber. The few vice sect leaders and the group of disciples from Sun Moon sect looked completely aghast. Two of the Sun Moon sect's disciples, who stood to the side by themselves, were exchanging glances with each other. "Do you have any confidence?" One of them suddenly opened his mouth to ask in a low voice. "No, you." The other person shook his head before he posed the same question. "No." The former also shook his head. Both of them immediately went silent. They were the two strongest people among the current younger generation of Sun Moon sect. However, even they could not clearly see the punch that Duan Lingtian, the five-element sect's disciple, threw earlier. Not only that, none of them dared to say that they could kill a Lu Kai who went all out and activated a grade 2 spirit saber with just their bare hands. However, Duan Lingtian had done it. How powerful! At the Empyrean Temple side, Zanbei's eyes were narrowed while his face was completely frozen. He did not think that Duan Lingtian's strength would be elevated to such level in just a few months. Now, this is what we call interesting. However, the moment he recalled the battle bet between Duan Lingtian and himself, a wave of excitement and anticipation immediately surged in Zanbei's heart. It was apparent that he did not fear Duan Lingtian at all despite the strength that Duan Lingtian had demonstrated. 936 inches Amitabha, congratulations, little benefactor Duan. Under the watchful eyes of the others, Wei Kong, the abbot of Empyrean Temple, slowly lifted his hand up and threw 4 fragments at Duan Lingtian. 9th level concept fragments. Although they were already mentally prepared, the instant they witnessed the 4 9th level concept fragments falling into Duan Lingtian's hands, many of the people present still could not suppress the shock that rose up in their hearts as they became consumed with envy. Those were 9th level concept fragments after all. Even in the respective sects they were in, there were only a few pieces in their hands. However, right now, Duan Lingtian, just this one young disciple from 5-element sect, had monopolized 4 9th level concept fragments. Even many of the high officials from the major sects could not help but be consumed by envy and jealousy as well. Duan Lingtian took the 4 9th level concept fragments and placed them into his spatial ring one by one while he thanked Wei Kong, the Empyrean Temple's abbot. "Thank you, Master Wei Kong. You're too polite, little benefactor Duan." "I didn't do much," Wei Kong replied indifferently. Duan Lingtian nodded his head before narrowing his eyes at Chen Feng, the sect leader of Sun Moon sect. His face was ashen. With a smile, Duan Lingtian said, "Sect leader Chen Feng, thank you for your 2 9th level concept fragments." Chen Feng's originally pale face darkened instantly as he snorted. "Duan Lingtian, what can you do even if you have that 2 9th level concept fragments? You'll only be considered capable if you can retain the 2 fragments. Otherwise, you'll only be carving a path for someone else." The instant Chen Feng's words left his mouth, many disciples, eyes from the Empyrean Temple, Blade sect and Sun Moon sect lit up immediately. Indeed, would they not be able to snatch the 4 9th level concept fragments in Duan Lingtian's hands after they entered the Martial Emperor's secret treasure? Naturally, there were more people who had these thoughts in their minds, but their intentions were crushed ruthlessly by him. What a joke! After all, one would need to be capable enough before one could even hope to snatch the 9th level concept fragments from Duan Lingtian's hand. Otherwise, it would only be a one-way ticket to hell. The scene of Duan Lingtian punching the 9th level void interpretation martial artist who had comprehended the 9th level void interpretation concept to death earlier was deeply seared into their minds. It would not disappear for a very long time. However, there were 4 9th level concept fragments on Duan Lingtian. If 4 people joined forces to kill him, each of them would be able to get 1 9th level concept fragment each. The moment Chen Feng's words left his mouth, the restlessness from the 3 major Fasa's disciples, other than 5-element sect, did not escape Duan Lingtian's eyes. However, he did not feel disturbed by it at all. "Thank you for your concern, sect leader Chen Feng," Duan Lingtian replied Chen Feng casually before he cast a glance at the group of disciples from the 3 major forces who were looking at him like he was a prey. "I'd love to get closer to anyone who really wants to obtain the 4 9th level concept fragments in my hands." A dazzling and confident smile appeared on Duan Lingtian's face. Upon hearing his words and seeing the confident smile on his face, many of the young disciples immediately dismissed the idea of going against Duan Lingtian to snatch the 4 ninth-level concept fragments. Naturally, there were many exceptions as well. After all, the temptation of these 4 ninth-level concept fragments was just too huge. Even if they already knew Duan Lingtian had a remarkable strength, they still wanted to give it a try. As the saying went, how can you catch the tiger cub if you don't enter the tiger's lair? Under the watchful eyes of the others, Duan Lingtian once again went to stand with Feng Tianwu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyang. At the same time, he also asked the 3 of them to move toward the group of people from 5 Element sect. Duan Lingtian then introduced the 3 of them to Guo Chong, Qi Yu, Huang Daniu and Chen Wei, and vice versa. Sect leader Guo, Peak Master Qi, Feng Tianwu and the other 2 greeted Guo Chong and Qi Yu politely while they nodded at Huang Daniu and Chen Wei with a smile. Prior to this, I've never heard Duan Lingtian mention anything about knowing such an extraordinary genius like you, Miss Feng. From what I can see, your strength is in no way inferior to Duan Lingtian's, right? Qi Yu asked with a twinkling smile in his eyes as he stared intensely at Feng Tianwu. You flatter me, Peak Master Qi. How can I possibly be better than Big Brother Duan? Feng Tianwu replied quickly and modestly. Tianwu, don't be so modest. Previously when that Lian Shang was attacking me, even I wouldn't be able to respond in time to your speed if I didn't prepare beforehand. Duan Lingtian shook his head. The strength that Feng Tianwu demonstrated at that time had also taken him by surprise. Unfortunately, by the time he regained his senses, Feng Tianwu had already retracted her origin energy and fire concept, leaving no chance for him to probe her using his spiritual energy. However, he was certain that the strength that Feng Tianwu currently possessed was in no way inferior to him. He felt a jolt in his heart as his spiritual energy stretched out instantly and swept towards Feng Tianwu. He was trying to investigate her strength. In the next instance, he immediately figured out Feng Tianwu's cultivation base. Ignorance was bliss. The moment Duan Lingtian figured it out, he was so shocked that he was left speechless for quite a while. His mind went completely blank, and he stood there for a long time as though he was possessed. In the next second, he muttered to himself inaudibly, how's this possible? Tianwu's only at the 3rd level void interpretation. From Duan Lingtian's spiritual energies investigation, Feng Tianwu's cultivation base was not even a step in the 4th level void interpretation. It was only at the 3rd level void interpretation. Just a mere 3rd level void interpretation martial artist, and yet she could help him block Lian Shang's attack. He instantly became a little doubtful. However, the moment he remembered the scene where Feng Tianwu crippled Lian Shang, the disciple of Blade Sect's arm, he could not help but feel shaken for a while. Lian Shang is an 8th level void interpretation martial artist who has comprehended the 8th level intermediate sword concept. That means that Tianwu's strength is definitely better than his if she could sever his arm before he could react in time. Still, Tianwu is indeed only a 3rd level void interpretation martial artist. Could it be that the concept that Tianwu comprehended is the fire concept? The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, he immediately knew he had his answer. Feng Tianwu had a fire spirit body. The speed that she comprehended the fire concept could be considered as very fast. Basically, she would not encounter any bottleneck in the process of comprehending the fire concept. Apart from that, if she had some assistance from fire concept fragments, the speed that she comprehended the fire concept would leave all martial artists who did not possess the fire spirit body blushing in shame. But, even if she has the fire concept fragment for her cultivation, she shouldn't have been able to win against Lian Shang with just her 3rd level void interpretation, right? Duan Lingtian became more perplexed as he pondered over it. Lian Shang was an 8th level void interpretation martial artist who had comprehended the 8th level intermediate sword concept. With the help of the spirit saber, his strength was equivalent to the strength of over 270 ancient horned dragons. With Tianwu's 3rd level void interpretation cultivation base, even if she used the grade 3 spirit whip that he had refined for her, the most she could demonstrate was the strength of 68 ancient horned dragons. A 3rd level void interpretation martial artist had a strength of 40 ancient horned dragons if all the origin energy in the body was unleashed. The grade 3 spirit whip that he personally refined gave a 70% boost. That was equivalent to the strength of 28 ancient horned dragons. The 2 of them added up together would be the strength of exactly 68 ancient horned dragons. In other words, even if Tianwu has comprehended the 1st level advanced fire concept, Along with the strength of 68 ancient horned dragons, her strength would still only be at about 268 ancient horned dragons. It's still a far cry from Lian Shang's strength. Well, unless she has comprehended the second-level advanced fire concept. In that case, she would have a strength of 368 ancient horned dragons if she unleashes all of her strength. That would be enough for her to beat Lian Shang. Duan Lingtian's mind was whirring rapidly as he tried to make sense of the information in his mind. While he was still mulling over the information in his head, he suddenly gasped. It would still be impossible for Tian Wu to elevate her fire concept to such a level in such a short period of time even if she had the fire concept fragment to aid her. In that case, the only plausible explanation is the profound assimilation formation. Blade Sect had the profound assimilation formation as well. If it was the profound assimilation formation that allowed Feng Tianwu to go through such a transformation, then all of these would not be so surprising anymore. The profound assimilation formation is the inscription formation that was created by the rebirth martial emperor. For an innate spirit body like Tianwu's fire spirit body, it would have an extraordinary effect compared to ordinary people. After going through the rebirth martial emperor's memory, Duan Lingtian very quickly found the reason. Not only that, based on the rebirth martial emperor's judgment, the profound assimilation formation would tremendously elevate an innate spirit body that was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. That's to say, there's a possibility that Tianwu's fire concept is not as simple as being at the third-level advanced stage. The instant he muttered this sentence to himself, Duan Lingtian discreetly gasped. Duan Lingtian, I never thought that you knew such an exceptional stunning beauty like Miss Feng. This is amazing. A voice entered Duan Lingtian's ears and woke him from his daze. It was none other than Huang Daniu who was talking to him. Rolling his eyes at Huang Daniu, Duan Lingtian scoffed as he answered, could it be that you thought everybody I know is a big blockhead like you? Apart from Duan Lingtian and Huang Daniu, the other people standing close by, including Guo Chong and Qi Yu, could not suppress the laughter boiling up from their chests. Whoosh, 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 all of a sudden, the sound of a gust of faint wind whistling resonated from afar and converged into two gusts without any warning. Upon hearing the noise, the four major sects present on the scene immediately looked toward the source with their eyes alert. With just a glance, they could see two groups of people making their way toward them with great strength and vigor. In just a short while, they had already arrived and came to a halt at once. It's the Skywolf Fort people. And the emotion-severing people as well. Many of Blade Sect's and Empyrean Temple's disciples immediately called out in a low voice. As two of the four major forces in the southern district of the Northern Desert, Blade Sect and the Empyrean Temple had a more profound understanding of Skywolf Fort and Emotion-Severing Sect than Five Elements Sect who came from the eastern district of the Northern Desert and Sun Moon Sect who came from the western district of the Northern Desert. Skywolf Fort. Long before the Skywolf Fort's people appeared, Duan Lingtian's gaze had already locked on 4 out of 5 people who were leading the group, 3 old men and 1 middle-aged man. Meng Li, Ning Kan, Yu Kong, and Feng Wei. These 4 people were part of the 5 Vice Fort Masters. They were also the people who chased him and tried to kill him when he was making his way to the Blade Sect camp from the ancient desert city with a group of Blade Sect's people previously. 937 Chapter 938, 5 Inscription Formations. There was no doubt Meng Li and the other 3 had immediately noticed Duan Lingtian's gaze on them. If it was before, they would definitely look at Duan Lingtian with a look of contempt. However, they did not dare to do that anymore after they found out about the relationship between Duan Lingtian and that young miss. Although they were not going to worsen the conflict between Skywolf Fort and Duan Lingtian, they would not take the initiative to apologize to him either. Put aside the fact that Zisheng would definitely be unhappy if they had done that and would become unwilling to work on behalf of Skywolf Fort with all his might, Skywolf Fort was also unwilling to embarrass themselves in the front of all the major forces. For this reason, they chose to ignore Duan Lingtian completely instead. However, the fact that they chose to ignore him did not mean that it could wipe out Duan Lingtian's raging fire. After sweeping a cold and sharp glance at Meng Li and the other 3, Duan Lingtian's attention finally landed on the white-clad young man behind them. Zisheng. When Duan Lingtian looked at him, he was already staring at Duan Lingtian. Moreover, when Duan Lingtian looked at him, Zisheng's voice transmission had already entered his ears in a timely manner. Duan Lingtian, I didn't think your life would be so long. 4 Vice Fort Masters attacked you at the same time and yet you still survived, huh? Upon hearing Zishang's words, Duan Lingtian's face turned so dark that it was absolutely appalling. Despite the fact that he could already guess that it was Zishang who was pulling the strings behind the curtains when the 4 vice fort masters brought 10 Skywolf fort elders to chase after him, the second he received this confirmation from Zishang personally, his emotion was still greatly affected. In just an instant, frosts gleamed in his eyes and a killing intent was apparent in them. Zishang, the martial emperor's secret treasure will be your grave. After taking a deep breath and calming his agitated emotions, Duan Lingtian sent a sharp voice transmission to Zishang's ears. There was not a hint of emotions in his words at all. This is also what I wanted to tell you. To Duan Lingtian's surprise, Zishang, who would usually admit defeat in front of him previously, was acting particularly tough today. It was as though he was confident that he would be able to kill Duan Lingtian. It seems like your strength has improved a lot, huh? Otherwise, you won't be acting so confident now. Duan Lingtian sneered. It's easy for me to kill you, you know, Zishang responded coldly. I'm looking forward to it. Duan Lingtian's eyes shone even more brightly as he said each word clearly. Looking at one of the 5 old men who was leading the Skywolf fort, Wei Kong, the Empyrean Temple abbot, asked with his 10 fingers linked together, Amitabha, Vice Fort Master Luo, Fort Master Qing didn't come this time. The latter was none other than Luo Fu, the leader of the 5 vice sect leaders in Skywolf Fort. Abbot Wei Kong. Faced with Wei Kong, the leader of the Empyrean Temple, Luo Fu did not dare to slack and quickly replied, our fort master is recently caught up with some matters. For this reason, he doesn't have the time to come. Wei Kong's eyes gleamed as he smiled and replied, such a big matter as the martial emperor's secret treasure and Fort Master Qing doesn't even have the time to come. Looks like the issue that he's caught up with recently must be of great importance. Yes, very important. Luo Fu nodded his head. However, the corner of his mouth twitched a little. At this moment, the other 4 vice fort masters of Skywolf Fort immediately turned awkward as well. It was very hard for them to imagine what the expressions of these people from the other 5 major forces would be like if they found out that the reason the fort master of Skywolf Fort did not come was to become a steed for a girl. Naturally, they would not disclose this to anyone. If this story spread out, putting aside the fact that Skywolf Fort would become the laughingstock of the northern desert, even the disciples from Skywolf Fort would not be able to accept this matter as well. Sect Leader Pei, it's been a while since we last met. I didn't know you've already taken over the position of the sect leader of Emotion Severing Sect, greetings to you. After greeting Luo Fu, Wei Kong looked at the leader of Emotion Severing Sect. He was a plainly clothed middle-aged man with a frosty expression on his face. That plain-clothed middle-aged man was none other than Peian, the sect leader of Emotion Severing Sect. Even when Peian was faced with Wei Kong, the Empyrean Temple abbot, his face still remained cold and aloof. With a faint nod, he casually greeted him, Abbot Wei Kong. However, Wei Kong did not appear to be offended by this. After letting out a faint smile, he stood there quietly. Meanwhile, the senior officials of the 6 major sects present on the scene greeted each other. Time continued to pass quietly. Not long after, the sun began to set. The sky was covered with the glow of sunset. It was crimson, making the entire sky appear like it was painted with a tinge of red. The entire scene was absolutely breathtaking. It's time. Suddenly the group of senior officials leading the 6 major forces exchanged glances with each other before swooping down one by one. They entered the sophisticated mountainous terrain. Let's go. When Duan Lingtian and the other disciples from the 6 major forces saw this, they hastily followed suit. They did not dare to hesitate at all. They knew that the martial emperor's secret treasure was about to open at this moment. When they were on the way here, the 6 major forces disciples, including Duan Lingtian and the other 5 element sects disciples, had learned some facts about the martial emperor's secret treasure from the senior officials of their respective sects. The martial emperor's secret treasure had a specific opening time. It would only open for a day, and if they did not enter on that day, they would not have the opportunity to enter again. Naturally, there was a time limit for entering but there was none for exiting. The inscription formation on the gate of the martial emperor's secret treasure only prohibited one from entering but not exiting. Additionally, it was said that the martial emperor's secret treasure that they would be entering this time was buried deep underground. Many inscription formations that possessed great destructive power encircled it. If somebody tried to destroy the gate forcefully, the inscription formations that possessed great destructive power would automatically activate and shatter the entire martial emperor's secret treasure in just one blow. As a result, the vast number of treasures inside the martial emperor's secret would be forever buried underground as well. It was precisely for this reason that all of the forces who knew about the existence of this martial emperor's secret treasure did not dare to act as they pleased. They could only follow the rules set by the martial emperor book by book, and let the young disciples who were under the age of 40 to enter and search for the profundity fragment that they needed. Very soon, under the guidance of the senior officials of the 6 major forces, Duan Lingtian and the other disciples of the 6 major forces had arrived at a spacious valley. It was the valley that they were hovering above earlier. The valley was spacious, and there were bushes all over the place. Nothing appeared particularly eye-catching over here. The entrance to the martial emperor's secret treasure is here. The disciples from the 6 major forces, including Duan Lingtian, had bewilderment written on their faces. Duan Lingtian lifted an eyebrow as he extended his spiritual energy. In just a short while, he found a sign in one of the bushes in the valley. A dense inscription formation aura could be felt in that direction. As the person whose memory was merged with the lifelong inscription memory of the rebirth martial emperor, Duan Lingtian had a profound understanding of inscription formations. He easily recognized the few inscription formations there. There were a total of 5 inscription formations. The one placed at the highest point was the inscription formation that set a fixed opening time for the secret treasure. It would only be opened once, and there was a specific time. Under the inscription formation was another inscription formation that was created based on the age-measuring pearl. That was exactly the inscription formation that verified the age of the martial artists who entered the secret treasure. Apart from that, there were another 3 inscription formations underneath this inscription formation. When Duan Lingtian found them, he could not help but gasp in shock. The martial emperor powerhouse was really daring. He even set up 3 killing formations by the entrance. Once these 3 killing formations are triggered, even a 9th-level martial monarch stage powerhouse would be slaughtered instantly. Duan Lingtian learned about the horrors of these 3 killing formations from the rebirth martial emperor's memory. Other than using valuable and precious materials, these 3 killing formations also needed the spiritual energy of a martial emperor stage to set up. Every intersecting inscription inside could only be inscribed by a martial emperor stage inscription master. Looks like that martial emperor was most likely an inscription master, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Other than observing everything in the valley, Feng Tianwu, who was by Duan Lingtian's side, sometimes watched Duan Lingtian as well. It just so happened that she saw the glum look on his face. For that reason, she asked with her voice transmission, "Big brother Duan, did you find something?" "Yes." Duan Lingtian nodded his head as he replied with his voice transmission, "If I didn't sense it wrongly, the entrance of the martial emperor's secret treasure is underneath the bush right there." Apart from having an inscription formation that set the opening time and another inscription formation that inspects the age of the people who enter the secret treasure, there are another 3 inscription formations that are extremely horrifying and lethal. While speaking, Duan Lingtian looked in the direction where he could feel the inscription formations. When Duan Lingtian finished saying this using his voice transmission, the senior officials of the 6 major forces hovered above the bushes in tacit agreement as they casually made their moves at the same time. They immediately cleared the bushes away. Every senior official from the 6 major forces was at void transformation or above. They controlled their origin energies and turned their concepts into sabers. The bushes were cleared away in a blink of an eye. After the bushes were cleared away, a magnificent door that lay on the ground appeared before everyone's eyes. The door was set in the surface of the ground. Its design was huge yet simple. There was not a trace of dust that could be seen on it, and it emitted a great fluctuation. The great fluctuation that poured out seemed to indicate the long journey of time that the great door had gone through. Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, a hint of alertness could be seen on Feng Tianwu's delicate face. "So, what should we do now? Do we still go in?" "Relax. The 3 killing formations only target people who enter forcefully and also those who are over 40. Other than these, the 3 killing formations will not be activated at all," Duan Lingtian reassured her. When Feng Tianwu heard this, she was immediately hit by a pang of realization. "Ah, so that's how it is. Is this the entrance to the martial emperor's secret treasure? This great door appears to be extremely ancient. I wonder how long it has existed." The young disciples of the 6 major forces followed suit behind the senior officials of their respective sects. As they looked at the gigantic door on the ground, they buried their heads together in heated discussions. They had a curious look on their faces. Upon hearing the discussions of the young disciples from each of the major sects, Luo Fu, the leader of the 5 vice fort masters of Skywolf Fort, slowly explained, the Martial Emperor's secret treasure below the Great Door is said to have existed for 1,000 years. The Martial Emperor who left behind this secret treasure died a natural death 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years. All of the young disciples from the major forces, including Duan Lingtian, were immediately taken aback. 938 Chapter 939, Opening the Martial Emperor's Secret Treasure. Setting an inscription formation and leave the secret treasure behind to be opened 1,000 years later, just how powerful was this method? Apart from Duan Lingtian and the other senior officials who had long known about all these from some other sources, everyone else was completely stunned and bewildered. Disbelief was obvious in their eyes. The majesty of a martial emperor was truly beyond their imagination. Even Zhang Yan, who stood quietly behind Pei and all this while, could not but help but feel slightly uneasy about this at this moment. This Zhang Yan seems to be slightly different from last time. Earlier, when the emotion-severing sect's people had just arrived, Duan Lingtian casually darted a few glances at him and did not pay much attention to him. Due to this, he did not notice the slight changes in Zhang Yan at all. However, now that he carefully studied him, he immediately noticed some difference in him. The Zhang Yan now seemed to exude a peculiar and indescribable aura from his body compared to the last few months. Duan Lingtian could clearly sense that something had happened to him in these few recent months. With Duan Lingtian's curiosity as the catalyst, he extended his spiritual energy and swept it toward Zhang Yan. He could immediately feel Zhang Yan's cultivation base, 7th level void interpretation. A few months ago, Zhang Yan's cultivation base was at the 6th level void interpretation, so Duan Lingtian was not surprised that he had made a breakthrough to the 7th level void interpretation. After all, Zhang Yan was different from him. Zhang Yan had left the Darken dynasty a long time ago and came to the northern desert outside of the foreign lands. Moreover, he had entered the emotion-severing sect and even became Pei An's disciple. There must be no lack of all sorts of spirit fruits exclusive to a void interpretation martial artist during his cultivation. Otherwise, he would not have been able to make a breakthrough to the 6th level void interpretation in just a few months. Consuming a large amount of spirit fruit exclusive to a void interpretation martial artist also meant that it would be hard for Zhang Yan to raise his cultivation base with the help of the spirit fruit's medicinal efficacy in the future unless he could procure other types of spirit fruits that were exclusive to a void interpretation martial artist that he had never consumed before. Don't tell me that I've sensed it wrongly. Duan Lingtian frowned before he quickly eased up. When he felt the indescribable and peculiar aura from Zhang Yan earlier, he could also sense a hint of danger on him as well. It was as if Zhang Yan could pose a threat to him now. When he probed Zhang Yan's current cultivation base with his spiritual energy, the first thought that came to his mind was that he might have sensed it wrongly. Zhang Yan, who was at the 7th level void interpretation, would never be a threat to him. After all, not everyone was like Feng Tianwu. After 30 minutes, Tianjiyu, the peak master of Earth Peak from 5 Element Sect, frowned a little as he murmured inquisitively, "Huh? Why is this martial emperor's secret treasure not open yet?" As soon as Tiangu's words left his mouth, the outer side of the majestic door lying on the ground immediately shone with a layer of translucent luster before it engulfed the entire door. Whoosh! The instant they saw the translucent luster, the people present on the scene erupted into an uproar at once. So this is the inscription formation? Probably. The young disciples from the 6 major forces were engaged in a heated discussion. Their eyes that were looking at the translucent luster were filled with curiosity. One of the monk disciples of the Empyrean Temple even flew out curiously and extended a hand to touch the translucent luster. It was as though he wanted to try and feel it. This Empyrean Temple disciple was extremely fast. He was so fast that nobody else could respond in time. Duan Lingtian was the first one to realize what was happening. At that time, that monk disciple from the Empyrean Temple had already touched the translucent luster, and his entire hand was even buried in it. Duan Lingtian shook his head. He knew that this Empyrean Temple disciple was beyond help now. At this moment, Duan Lingtian could clearly feel the first of the 3 killing formations beginning to whirl. It was apparent that it had been triggered. The senior officials from the 6 major forces returned to their senses one by one. Wei Kong, the Empyrean Temple's abbot's face blanched and he lost his usual cool. He shouted out loud, his previously calm demeanor was nowhere to be seen at the moment, "Stop!" Wei Kong's shout instantly made many of the disciples from all the forces tremble. Abbot, this luster can. Upon hearing Wei Kong's shout, the monk disciple from the Empyrean Temple, whose hand was already in the luster, did not seem to realize the crisis yet. Instead, it seemed like he was waiting to compliment it as he looked at Wei Kong. It was as though he was trying to tell him, Abbot, I've tested it out. We can go through this luster. However, before he could even finish his sentence, the entire valley suddenly shook violently. It was as if an extremely violent earthquake had just taken place, cutting his words off. Horror dawned on the Empyrean Temple's monk disciple's face at once. At this moment, even if he was extremely stupid and ignorant, he would have realized that he was in trouble. Without any hesitation, he quickly pulled his hand away from the translucent luster. Unfortunately, everything was already too late. The crowd present on the scene did not even see any energy at all. However, without any warning, the monk disciple from the Empyrean Temple momentarily froze. With a bang, his body blew up as it transformed into a bloody shower in the sky. It was a good thing that the people nearby managed to escape in time. Otherwise, they would most likely be splashed with his blood. Even so, the young disciples from each of the forces could not help but gasp. When they looked at the translucent luster shrouding the great door again, hints of dread and fear could be seen in their eyes. With a slightly pale face, Wei Kong warned the other Empyrean Temple's disciples, all of the disciples from the Empyrean Temple, listen. Unless this luster disappears on its own, none of you are allowed to approach it. The other senior officials from the other 5 great forces, including 5 Element sect, also warned their own disciples. The young disciples from each of the sects nodded their heads without any hesitation. Even if they were not cautioned, none of them would dare to get close to that translucent luster now. In their opinions, that translucent luster was no different from a flash flood or a wild beast. After that Empyrean Temple monk disciple touched that translucent luster, his body had been inexplicably blown up in an instant. They were sincerely scared of this lesson from the bottom of their hearts. Big Brother Duan, that was the force from the killing transformation. Feng Tianwu's voice transmission that was accompanied by a trace of fear entered Duan Lingtian's ears. Yes, Duan Lingtian nodded in response. Not only that, that was the force of the first of the 3 killing formations. My spiritual energy could sense that the other 2 killing formations that are even more powerful have not been triggered yet. An even more powerful killing formation? How powerful is it? Feng Tianwu was shocked by his words. After a moment of silence, Duan Lingtian replied Feng Tianwu through his voice transmission, I don't really know how strong it actually is, but let's just put it in this way. Out of the 3 killing formations, if the third one at the bottom is triggered, even a 9th level martial monarch stage powerhouse would most likely end up like the Empyrean Temple monk disciple from earlier. His voice was grave and solemn. If the third killing formation was triggered, it could even kill a 9th level martial monarch stage powerhouse. Colors drained from Feng Tianwu's face at once. From what she could see, a martial monarch stage powerhouse was extremely powerful. Even the Blade sect had spent quite a fortune for this martial emperor's secret treasure, and the reason was none other than to get their hands on the profundity fragments so that the sect could give birth to a martial monarch stage powerhouse. However, a new martial monarch stage powerhouse would only be at the 1st level martial monarch stage. Such an existence was just like a tiny ant in front of a 9th level martial monarch stage powerhouse. It was not worth mentioning at all. However, the killing formation by the entrance of that martial emperor's secret treasure could even kill a 9th level martial monarch stage powerhouse in just a flash, let alone the group of martial artists present on the scene right now who had not even entered the martial monarch stage. After the death of that Empyrean Temple's monk disciple, the entire vast valley regained its tranquility again. However, very soon, another loud bang could be heard in the sky. Many people were taken aback by surprise, and they instantly trembled in reflex. Rumble. Under the watchful eyes of the others, the great door shrouded in the translucent luster gradually opened and revealed its true face beneath. Under the door was a platform that emerged before everyone's eyes. On the side of the high platform, there was a stone ladder that went as far as eyes could see. It led down deep into the ground. Overlooking from top to bottom, the inside was painted entirely black. As for the other 3 sides, all they could see was a boundless depth that was just like a bottomless abyss. Flight prohibiting formation. Just when almost everyone had their attention on the high platform and the stone ladder, Duan Lingtian's spiritual energy that had been extended and went past the 5 inscription formations could clearly feel the aura emitting out of the arrays of inscription formations surrounding the high platform. That was none other than the flight prohibiting formation. The flight-prohibiting formation was an inscription formation that barred a martial artist at the void stage and above from flying once they entered the secret treasure, well, unless one's strength was powerful enough to overcome the shackle of that inscription formation. Otherwise, all one could do was walk on both feet when one entered the secret treasure. This flight-prohibiting formation must have also been left behind by that martial emperor. In that case, even if a 9th-level martial monarch stage powerhouse enters, he would have to walk on both feet as well, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Despite the fact that there were many inscription masters present among the crowd of senior officials from the 6 major sects who could more or less sense the aura from the flight-prohibiting formation, they could not pinpoint exactly what that inscription formation was. After all, they were different from Duan Lingtian, who bore the inscription memory of the rebirth martial emperor. The rebirth martial emperor had experienced 2 reincarnations before. During his second life, he had studied the inscription formations to the highest level. Moreover, he had created many inscriptions and inscription formations on his own, and he also understood all of the common inscriptions and inscription formations that could be found in Cloud Continent. Naturally, there were also some other uncommon inscriptions and inscription formations that the rebirth martial emperor had only heard of but did not understand the exact engraving and setup methods. Just like that split unite inscription formation that Duan Lingtian previously obtained in the Sword Monarch treasure that could allow a spirit sword to split into 9 and combine 9 into 1. The rebirth martial emperor really did not know how to engrave and set that formation up. With my current 2nd level void transformation spiritual energy, I wonder how many swords I can control now if I cultivate that 9 tribulation sword control technique. When Duan Lingtian recalled the Sword Monarch treasure, his heart gave a little jolt. Only now did he remember that when he received the quasi-royal grade spirit sword and the 3 pieces of profundity fragments in the Sword Monarch treasure, he also received a set of sword skill that was left behind by that white-clad Sword Monarch. 9 Tribulation Sword Control Technique. To cultivate the 9 Tribulation Sword Control Technique, one would require a strong spiritual energy to be able to simultaneously manipulate 9 swords that could soar through the sky and cast the skill perfectly. 939 Chapter 940, Bottomless Abyss. As the martial emperor's secret treasure at the bottom of the stone ladder. It should be. I was wondering what will show up behind the magnificent door that lies on the ground. I didn't expect to see a lonely and solitary platform there instead. After we go through the great door, we'll land on that high platform and then continue down where the stone ladder leads us. What lies at the end of the stone ladder is still a mystery to us. The unknown is always the most terrifying. It seems like we must constantly be on our watch after we enter the martial emperor's secret treasure. The young disciples from each sect buried their head together in heated discussions. Most of them were apprehensive. Some even thought of abandoning the quest. However, as soon as the thought of abandoning the quest rose up in their minds, they were hit with a pang mentally the moment they recalled the vast amount of treasures stored in the martial emperor's secret treasure. Immediately, the thought was quickly dismissed. As the saying went, wealth comes with danger. If one did not even have the courage to take any risk, one would be doomed to a mediocre life forever. If I can get more than 2 profundity fragments, I'll definitely soar up to the sky. Many of the young disciples from each sect were saying the same thing. Huang Daniu, who was standing close to Duan Lingtian, smiled as he said, "It seems like the distribution of profundity fragments in the other sects is same as our 5-element sect as well. Of course. Otherwise, who would risk their lives for the profundity fragment?" Duan Lingtian was not surprised. From what he could see, each of the major forces knew how to give and take to stir up their disciples' enthusiasm. Someone blurted out, "The great door of the martial emperor's secret treasure is now open. Shall we enter?" However, no one was willing to take the first step. One by one, everyone's eyes fell on the layer of translucent luster shrouding the wide-open great door. Ever since the monk disciple from the Empyrean Temple was blasted to death, this layer of translucent luster had cast a shadow over their hearts. If the luster was still there, they would not go any further. Whoosh! All of a sudden, a faint sound reverberated in the air. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the translucent luster vanished without a trace as if it was never there in the first place. It's finally gone. No one would have dared to take another step if it's still there. The young disciples from each of the major sects let out a huge sigh of relief. Shall we go in? At the same time, many young disciples were staring at the senior officials of the sects that they belonged to. Doubts could be seen in their eyes. Before the leaders had a chance to speak, another layer of gray luster appeared on top of the wide-open great door. Apart from Duan Lingtian, it elicited looks of horror from the people from each sect. Duan Lingtian became slightly speechless when he saw the expressions on the crowd's faces. It's merely an inscription formation that examines the ages of those who enters the gate. Is it necessary to be this melodramatic? Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Long after the translucent luster had vanished, he could already sense that another age-examining inscription formation had begun to activate. What's going on? The doors open, and the translucent luster has disappeared. So why is there another layer of gray luster appearing right now? Will this layer of gray luster be like the previous translucent luster? Will it take our lives with just a simple touch? The young disciples from each sect were worried sick, nobody dared to give it a try. Even the senior officials of each sect had a look of dread on their faces. Let's go. Duan Lingtian motioned to Feng Tianwu, Huang Daniyu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyang who stood beside him as he flew out all alone by himself. He charged straight at the gray luster with a very fast speed. Within seconds, Duan Lingtian had arrived in the vicinity of the gray luster. He's going to die. When Zisang and Hu Fei noticed Duan Lingtian's action, a sneer crept up on the corners of their mouths. Both of them were certain that Duan Lingtian would die. Duan Lingtian, Zanbei and Zhang Yan, who stood with the group of Empyrean Temple and Emotion-Severing Sect, raised their eyebrows right away. They were both taken aback by Duan Lingtian's actions. Apart from Tianjiyu who seemed to be lost in his own thoughts, horror dawned on the crowd of Five Element Sect's senior officials. This lad is too reckless. Guo Chong and Qi Yu were completely horrified. At this moment, Duan Lingtian had already touched the gray luster. Even if there was something amiss with that gray luster, it was too late for them to go to his rescue. Although almost everyone felt that Duan Lingtian would be annihilated, he entered the layer of the gray luster smoothly as though nothing was amiss. Through the ray of the setting sun that spilled all over the world like blood, the crowd could see the shadow behind the gray luster that landed firmly on the high platform inside. Duan Lingtian is all right. Looks like the gray luster is not lethal at all. The disciples from each sect finally came to an understanding. Before everyone else could figure out what was happening, a flash of a fiery spirit-like figure had already followed suit behind Duan Lingtian and passed through the gray luster to enter the great door. That was none other than Feng Tianwu. Su Li, Zhang Shouyang, and Huang Daniyu were still taken aback by Duan Lingtian's actions. Feng Tianwu was the only person who trailed after him like a shadow. It clearly showed her unconditional trust in Duan Lingtian. I never thought that a few guys like us can't even compete with a woman. Huang Daniyu shook his head and smiled wryly before following suit as well. Su Li and Zhang Shouyang exchanged glances with each other and smiled wryly as well before following suit to enter the gray luster and set foot on the mysterious platform under the great door. I understand now. At this moment, Tianjiyu, the peak master of Earth Peak from Five Element Sect, yelled in a deep voice, "This gray luster is the inscription formation that examines the age of those who enter." The moment Tiangu's words left his mouth, the inscription masters present were enlightened as well. At the same time, they began to wonder how Duan Lingtian knew the gray luster would not cause him any harm. Could it be that he was an inscription master too? If he really was an inscription master, how knowledgeable was he on the study of inscriptions that he was the first among all the inscription masters to figure it out? Whoosh! Very soon, another person from the Five Element Sect went through the gray luster and entered the great door as well. That was none other than Nangong Chen. Now that Nangong Chen had entered, Nangong Yi definitely would not miss out as well. Next, the Five Element Sect's disciples followed suit one by one like a shower of lights entering the gate. Humph, he's merely lucky. Zishang who stood behind the five vice sect leaders of Skywolf Fort had a glum expression his face. At first, he thought Duan Lingtian would be killed by the inscription formation from the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. However, instead of being killed, Duan Lingtian managed to become the first person that entered the great door and snatched the limelight. What are you rushing for? You can just enter right now and kill him directly, no? A gloomy, hoarse, and ancient voice sounded in Zishang's mind. It took him by surprise. The moment he heard that, Zishang's eyes lit up immediately. Kill. Without even waiting for the instructions from the five vice fort leaders of Skywolf Fort, he charged out and passed through Grey Luster to enter the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. A shocking amount of killing intent emitted out of his body. Under the shroud of the Grey Luster, a group of Five Element Sect's disciples, with Duan Lingtian as their leader, were standing on the high platform below the widely open majestic door. They were all looking at the surroundings inquisitively. Feng Tianwu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyang were by Duan Lingtian's side as well. The high platform was square. 3 out of the 4 directions were enshrouded in total darkness. It was deep and boundless. It stretched out as far as the eyes could see like a bottomless deep abyss. Only the last direction had a stone ladder that led to the bottom. Huang Daniu frowned as he murmured to himself, "This stone ladder stretches as far as the eyes can see. I wonder where it leads to." "No matter where it leads to, we have no other choice. We can only follow its way down," Duan Lingtian replied. "Why don't we just try flying in from the other 3 sides?" Su Li suggested. "Fly." Upon hearing Su Li's words, Duan Lingtian smiled wryly. The moment they entered this high platform, they had already entered the range of that flight-prohibiting formation. "You want to fly? Sure, you can. However, you need to have a strength that's equivalent to a martial emperor first." Just as Duan Lingtian was about to explain, the colors on his face changed. It was as though he had sensed something. He lifted up his head abruptly and looked at the sky above. A white figure appeared there and transformed into a white lightning in a blink of an eye as it charged directly at him. Zishang. Duan Lingtian's face turned dark instantly. He recognized the white-clad young man that was charging at him immediately. It was Zishang. It did not cross his mind that Zishang's speed had already become so fast. In a flash, he had already arrived before Duan Lingtian. Bang! An explosion shook the air. That came from Zishang, who was in front of Duan Lingtian, lifting a fist to punch him. The flames on his fist soared up accompanied by the waves of sharp blue wind aura. It burned even more vigorously as time went by. His punch was like a strong mountain that pounced at Duan Lingtian. His speed was so swift that Duan Lingtian did not even have the time to block his attack. All he could do was instinctively retreat. "How dare you!" Almost at the same time, a feminine shout resonated in the air. That was none other than Feng Tianwu, who had begun to make her move. She was entirely shrouded in soaring flames. It was as if she had transformed into a true fire spirit as she pounded at Zishang, who was charging at Duan Lingtian. Whoosh! A long whip that was as long as a spirit snake shot up directly at Zishang's outstretched fist. At this moment, under the watchful eyes of the others, Duan Lingtian and Zishang, who was thrown off from the high platform, swayed for a second before dropping down uncontrollably in an extremely fast speed. It was as though they were going to smash into the bottomless abyss. At the same time, the long whip that Feng Tianwu fired out also missed. Zishang dropped sharply at a rapid speed, contrary to her expectations. "Big brother Duan." Feng Tianwu, who stood by the side of the high platform, stared at the purple figure that was slowly disappearing from sight into the bottomless abyss. Her expression changed abruptly. She did not even bother thinking about the consequences as she leapt downward. It was only after she had taken a leap that she understood why her big brother Duan and that Zishang would fall uncontrollably. As it turned out, no matter how much one tried to activate one's origin energy, one would not be able to hover in the air in this place. Miss Tianwu, horror dawned on Su Li, Zhang Shouyang, and Huang Daniu's faces immediately. As they stood at the edge of the high platform watching the falling Feng Tianwu, they did not know what was happening at all. Why can't we fly here?" At the same time, a startled voice entered their ears. It struck them dumb like a lightning.